I was doing some research last night and I saw that about 17 comments were submitted from members of the public. And for those of you that attended yesterday, we couldn't express enough that your feedback is so critical as these regulations continue to come out, right? Because we can't sit there as individuals that want to participate in the market and then not voice your opinion. If there is an opportunity for open comment, this is your opportunity to put your words forward. And so there were some concerns that came back through some of the comments in regards to testing for heavy metal contamination in products, as well as lowering the $20 per transaction for non-resident buyers. And I think Positive, you may be the one to answer this again. In regards to contamination, that's often a concern in the mainland as well. You know, additional fees are always a concern, right? Because people don't want to pay more than what they can. But can you speak to some of these concerns and how you all will address this moving forward?
Okay, which one specifically?
The contamination piece and as well as fees.
There were individuals were asking for.
But I'm going to throw some of these to Attorney Walker right next to me, but regarding contamination, the purpose of having anything that's going to market be lab tested is to avoid contamination, to ensure that we're testing for whether it's heavy metals, pesticides and different things. You know, we're hoping, and I wanted to chime this in yesterday when you were speaking about integrity, because you mentioned that in business.
Yes.
We're hoping that the integrity that already exists in the cannabis, in the underground cannabis industry, is not lost in the greed for money. Because cannabis, even though it makes a lot of money, initially is not about money. And even the whole legalization move really wasn't about money at first. The support comes now because there is money. So I hear you with that, and hopefully the testing processes that we have in place and the requirement to do so can protect that and Attorney Walker.
Sure, I can follow up. The regulations call for standard lab testing and protocols, which would cover the heavy metals. So I think that was addressed by the OCR when they were responding to the comments. Regarding the $20 fee and the comments about money and lowering the costs, there's, in addition to what Ms. Joseph Smith explained as the policy of the governor, the territory is also looking at the industry as a revenue generator. So the idea is that tourists who are coming off of cruise ships in St. Thomas would be able to have a cannabis experience that they would pay for. The tourism industry is changing. People are shopping less and paying more for experiences than maybe jewelry or purses or whatever. So the idea is to seek the revenue from the tourists, not so much from the people who would be living here or who would be using it for medicinal purposes. So the likelihood of the fee being lowered is not likely.
And that's a rule on that they may be considered later. But right now the rules are what they are. We're trying to go forward. We know they're not perfect, and they may be tweaked at some time in the future, but we can't speak that for now.
They are what they are now.
Now, yeah, that's what's there to get change is gonna
You like that?
take us take us another.
And you know, but I appreciate that because you're absolutely right. Like, because more people are paying for experiences, and as non-residents who are tourists who are coming to the VI, the whole point is to bring that economic revenue back to the island. And so I appreciate that, and I do understand that. And I think later on we'll be diving deeper into the economic development funding available. So I can't wait for that discussion because I'll be moderating that too. But one of the other questions, comments that came were lowering the age from 21 to 18. And given that the current age to consume alcohol is 18, I guess some comments came back that why couldn't the consumption for cannabis be lowered to 18? Would anyone here like to speak to that?
As a senatorial question.
Oh,
Pass the mic down. Senator James, do you want to take that?
I can get it. So
Greetings once again. Obviously, it was done for a reason. Anything can be amended. I'm consensus driven. I think it needs discussion because when we first came up with the number, we had discussions behind closed doors, not saying it was a secret meeting. This is what we do as senators. We caucus. But nothing stops us from revisiting that conversation. But it has to be something where it's consensus driven. We have town halls or whatever discussion, whatever the platform may be. But I would not be the one to say I can do it. I can be a part of the conversation, and like I said, it can be amended. But as far as this disparity with the ages, I agree to some extent, but I can't do it by myself. So that is why we need to have further conversation.
And the idea, the argument is that we allow alcohol drinking at 18, so why not allow cannabis use at 18? And I know there's the argument for those who are in opposition to cannabis legalization altogether, that the brain of a human gets at its hardened point at age 25 or so. So I guess the consideration to be at 21 was falling somewhere in between that middle. I can understand the background for that. I can also understand the other argument. Medicinally, if you're not restricted to an age, that's the purpose of medicinal cannabis. If the doctor prescribes or recommends it, that's the term they use. If the doctor recommends it, then a child of any age can have access to medicinal cannabis. Okay, so we're just trying to be responsible, but it's a good discussion to have, and we don't see why it's not worthy of discussion.
It's fine. I mean, during the process, compromises had to be struck, and there was a lot of pushback as to the age of users. Like Mr. Nelson explained, for medicinal purposes, of course, it's not restricted to the age of 21, but for recreational use, there was definitely some discussions back and forth in the community as well as in the legislature when the legislation was passed.
I don't know if you all heard the word, but I did. Compromises have to be made. And that happens every day in our laws, right? When they're fighting to get something pushed through, the goal is to get it pushed through. And just like in relationships, sometimes we have to make compromises to get to that happy place. And while not everyone may be pleased with the overall result, we know that we at least have come to some kind of an agreement. And as the senator said, there may be an opportunity to change that. And so I find it interesting when people are so fixated on something, thinking, well, that's it, it's over. It does sound like there's room for change, but why don't we start at 21 and then perhaps see how the market goes, and then perhaps then we can readdress the age limit. Currently, right now, what is allowed for 21 in terms of possession?
for 24 and
So the law currently does not criminalize an individual who has up to 2 ounces. Now, it sounds tricky because the police will confiscate the cannabis, and you are given a fine. So it's a civil offense of $100. You have 90 days to pay. If you don't pay, it doubles to $200. Of course, if you don't, then you have other consequences to pay. So you're allowed to have up to 2 ounces without being considered a criminal act. Unfortunately here, our decrim law does not allow for any growing, and there's people who are making that argument. And if you are coming with a question, that is something that the legislature perhaps will have to consider in its movement forward. But as was mentioned, compromise, we took what we could have gotten to get some form of movement.
Absolutely.
So I think there is some confusion in terms of licenses, right? There are people who currently have businesses who are licensed operators, not in cannabis, but they are operators of business, and so you know where I'm going with this. Can someone on the panel speak to non-touch licensed businesses versus a cannabis business? And you know I'm looking directly at you because we just, so I want to pass the mic down.
Good day, Horace Graham. There's an interesting thing, and I actually was really pleased to sit down here yesterday and listen to part of the discussion that you all were having about businesses that or ancillary support businesses for the cannabis industry. There are individuals that are plumbers, let's say, or construction contractors, or any variety of other business activity. Those businesses will continue to be viable within this, and it looks like as the industry grows, that there may be opportunities for other businesses or those ancillary businesses to really render support to the industry. And so the important thing to note here is that there is a distinction between the cannabis related licenses, and others on the panel will be able to discuss that more thoroughly, and our standard businesses that many of us who are entrepreneurs here in this room have come to understand. And so my encouragement is for folks to research, look and see what opportunities there are in the cannabis industry for you to be able to render those particular services. And I'm sure people will be building facilities, they will be adding security, they'll be doing all sorts of things necessary that a regular business would be able to provide, that's not actually engaging in handling the cannabis product.
Do those ancillary businesses need to let any offices know that they are contracted by a cannabis business?
If they're gonna touch cannabis, if they're gonna use cannabis in their business in some kind of way, yes. If any form of cannabis, if you're gonna sell retail cannabis, if you have a massage place and you decide to use drugs beyond CBD, you don't need to report CBD, but if you decide to use THC products, then you need to have a retailer's license to allow you to do that.
But an ancillary business do they need to let anyone know, listen, I now am in contract or I have a partnership with a licensed operator?
It depends on which type of ancillary business. So the law and the regulations speak to third-party vendors. So there's a third-party vendor certification. So if you're going to be, even if you're not touching, if you're entering an establishment, you have to have some sort of identification card and certification, and that all falls within the regulatory scheme of the OCR. So you would need to look at the regulations, determine whether your ancillary business fits within those parameters, and then you would want to go ahead and certify with the OCR to make sure you're in compliance.
I think what might help is, let me do this. So here are the licenses allowed.
Oh, that was my question, but go please. No, break it down.
So here are the licenses. There's a cannabis cultivation license, and there's 3 levels: micro grow, medium-sized grow, and a large-sized grow. 100 plants, 500 plants, 1,000 plants. Then there's a cannabis manufacturing license. That's individuals who are turning cannabis into something else, oils, extract, whatever. Okay. Then there's a cannabis dispensary license, of course. That's the hot potato. Everybody wants a dispensary, right? And then, yeah, I heard it. There's a cannabis research and development license. Okay, individuals who want to get strains going, develop seedlings, and we're hoping to connect legacy growers to get an opportunity on that. There's an interesting conversation taking place. There's a cannabis testing facility license. That's a lab. Okay. There's an adult use lounge permit, and that's unique to the Virgin Islands. But most places don't have a cannabis lounge license. When you procure cannabis at the dispensary, you have to find some consumption lounge. Yeah, you have to go to find some place to sneak into it. So to have a lounge where you can legally go and cool out and do it, that's great. a cannabis use permit. That means you're having an event and you want to have somebody there doing something with cannabis. That's a temporary permit for that event. Okay? Like everybody having 420 events tomorrow, guilty party talking. And we will need to have a permit in order to do so. Okay? Cannabis temporary use permit. Okay, but that's why I'm confusing them. Okay, but they're similar, again, for events. On-site cannabis consumption permit, again, similar for a temporary situation. And then they have the micro cultivation permit. Right? And those are licenses available. Anything else that's doing that may be considered ancillary transportation,
What about, is distribution and transportation the same?
Yes. No, when you say distribution I would consider at the dispensary level. Transportation are individuals who might decide to have a courier service to move cannabis from the cultivation site to a manufacturing or dispensary site. You can't just put it in the back of your truck and drive 10 pounds of marijuana down the public road. You can't just jump on your private boat and put 20 pounds of marijuana. You take it to St. Thomas, to your dispensary in St. Thomas. There are processes that you have to follow in order for it to be within the confines of the law.
I can, just to make sure it's clear, so someone like a transporter would certify with the OCR, right? Someone like a security agency that's providing security for a dispensary would certify with the OCR. So you have licenses, which Mr. Nelson just listed. You have permits that require you to complete an application with the OCR, but you have a whole other category for third-party vendors that would have to certify.
So those are the temporary, those permits would be the temporary licenses?
The permits, not all of them are temporary. So you have licenses, you have permits. So a license would be a dispensary license, a permit would be a micro cultivator.
Okay.
And then you have third-party vendors, which are completely different. So those are more of the ancillary businesses. Those are the transporters,
Okay.
security,
Got it.
things like that.
Okay.
And the reason why I wanted to keep pushing on the question, because again, we mentioned yesterday that this event is considered an ancillary business, right? But now, as Mr. Nelson says, and as Ms. Walker have said, for the purposes of a temporary license, if you wanted to consume at your event, you now would have to apply, which is why I asked, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Graham, thank you, I'm so sorry, I apologize. Which is why I asked him the question of making the difference, right? Explaining the difference between the licenses, because again, you can already operate your business, but what they're saying, and I think I'm clear on this, is that if you have consumption without a permit, you're actually breaking the law, right? And so it goes back to the conversation we had yesterday about understanding the regulations. And while I've explained it myself that sometimes I miss it, it's over my head. I need someone to break it down for me. So if you just allow me to just be your questions, right? As I'm listening, I'm thinking, okay, I get it, but just to be clear, if we're having this event and someone wants to consume, we have to make sure that we apply for that temporary. Doesn't mean that you get to carry that on forever and ever. Temporary is exactly what that means, yes?
Yeah, as far as the organization, though, you don't have responsibility and over what individuals at your event might do off to the side. That's a different situation. But if as an organization you sanction, okay, hey guys, that's our smoke room over there.
Right.
That you'll need a permit for. But at certain events it's customary and it is a culture that there's going to be people going out to the side.
Oh, right.
So you're not
Often
responsible
side
for
is
that.
one thing,
Right.
but if you say, I'm having a puff paint party, but I just have events, right? Because it happens, puff and paint, if no one thought about it, it's a great thing.
Have you heard the advertisements?
Okay, I want to move on because we've talked a lot about cannabis, and we know that there are a number of hemp-derived CBD products in the market. And while there's still yet some confusion about hemp in the market. I wanted to actually pose this question to Miguel, if you would mind, because I believe you've done a lot of work, right, around hemp, and if you can speak to, there are a number of products or brands in the market that perhaps are not following the guidelines in terms of labeling, and probably some are out there even making some, I would say, I don't want to say illegal, but they're not following the rules in terms of what the products can do for, let's say, patients or individuals that are looking for pain management. And so if you can speak to what are the guidelines in terms of labeling hemp products?
Miguel Tricoche. In my experience, what in regulating and inspecting hemp products, some of the challenges that local retailers were facing is making sure that your hemp product is properly labeled. There are certain things that you can say and that you cannot say about hemp products. So I'm gonna go directly to one, just kind of goes over into the medicinal side, but part of your labeling that you cannot have is that you cannot claim that your product is going to treat or cure any type of disease or illness. Matter of fact, on your labeling, you should actually say, and I'm, see if I can quote this directly, it's a little blurry right now, that this product is not approved by the FDA to cure, treat, or anything along those lines. I'm not quoting it directly, but we've all seen those products. We've all seen that labeling on those products. That's very important, but you can't, because you cannot do that. In addition to that, I want to talk a little bit about sourcing. In the past, I've seen local retailers source their products, and the product sourcing, the company that they're getting it from, isn't registered in the state that they claim to be, where they're founded. They're not licensed, but they're representing themselves as a hemp manufacturer and distributor. One of the key things that we have to make sure here in the Virgin Islands is that you are sourcing your product from a viable source. How do you know you have a viable source? I can see that question coming. So how do I know if I'm a retailer? On the products that you get, there should be a QR code that either has the information for the company that manufactured the product and a breakdown of the compounds that are in that product, specifically making sure that your THC does not exceed 0.3%. And I'm going to say that again, Delta 9 THC should not exceed 0.3%. I have seen labeling when it talks about Delta 8. We're talking Delta 9. Delta 8 doesn't have anything to do with your product in terms of whether it's a good hemp product or not. That's another conversation altogether. But if you're a retailer, what you are looking for to make sure that you're retailing the right product is that that THC needs to be 0.3% or below. Very important. I've seen it. The Assistant Commissioner Graham and I, we've had these conversations when I was with the LCA. I have inspected stores, and I won't say which stores or which island, where we've had to pull products off the shelf because there is no QR code. I've been in situations with law enforcement agencies, again, I won't say which one, where products have come in a plastic bag. And that plastic bag is filled with, and I quote, hemp products. No QR code, just a phone number. When we called that phone number had an answering machine for a pool company. When that answering machine picked up that number, it then sent us directly to a residential house. We pulled up that residential house, and it's a residential house. So how do we have a residential residence with a number 4 pool company directly related to hemp products that's representing itself as a hemp manufacturer and distributor? So these are the things that, as we get into this business, as we talk about hemp, that you make sure that your retailer, your distributor, your producer is licensed and registered in the state, because if they are, that QR code will take you directly to that website. It will have contact information, it will have phone numbers, it will have emails, and you'll be able to pull up the chemical breakdown of what's in it. We have to be very specific, right? This is new territory for us. Matter of fact, it's new territory across the country. So we want to make sure that we do this right. And I would hate to see any entrepreneur getting into this business get caught in something that they don't need to be caught in. We don't want your products to get stopped at the post office if it's the post office. We don't want it to get stopped in customs. It should be an easy look at, and you should be able to get your product to sell. Because if it's not viable, it will be destroyed.
Thank you. But I do actually, not yet, honey, not yet. I do have a follow-up. There are a number of products that, and I say, you know, edible type, that are infused with hemp products. You and I were speaking earlier in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed, actually giving particular hemp products, I believe, to pets, that's not allowed. So can you also explain that? Because we know that there are a number of products in the market that are out there for pets.
Absolutely, let's talk about pets. So there are 2 different type of cannabis products that can be, I'm not gonna say that can be put into pet food, but that are put into pet food. And you've seen them. You can have hemp put into pet food, and you can have cannabis put into hemp food. I'll go to cannabis first. Cannabis put into pet food is not regulated by the FDA. Now, while there are no repercussions for putting it into the pet food, from a legal standpoint, what they do caution is that because it is not regulated by the FDA, they caution you not to use it unless you go to a vet and have that product looked at by your vet. So they're not saying not to use it. They're saying if you do so at your own risk, because it is not regulated. Because it's not regulated, then you don't know the amount of cannabis product that's in that particular food. So if you have a Yorkshire and you have a Rottweiler, how do you know what's healthy for your pet or not if it's just simply infused with cannabis? Is it too much for the Yorkshire, or is it too little for your Rottweiler? I'm just using that as an example. Because it's not regulated, you have no idea the amount of that product and the effect that it's going to have on your pet. So let's now look at hemp. It is the same thing as hemp, right? Hemp product, and we know 0.3% or less of a cannabis derivative, which is mostly only the seed and seed protein, etc. That also is not regulated or approved by the FDA. So whether you see a product that says it's cannabis for your pet or whether it's hemp, just know that it's not regulated. And there's a grass, I want to say, generally accepted as safe. The word escapes me. But in order for hemp to be used in pet food, it has to pass a validation as being generally accepted as safe. And to date, the FDA has not approved any, nor had they had any food additive petition. That's another way of putting an ingredient into animal food. You have to have a petition. They haven't had a petition, and they have no grass additives from hemp that have been approved to date. So putting that all together, if you have pets and you see any kind of food, pet food, that says it has cannabis or hemp in it, you're actually using that as your own risk. Just know that it has not been approved yet.
Thank you so much.
So I want to talk a little bit about the medical market, because I know we've touched on that some. You know, there are a number of big businesses that are looking to enter this market, and but we understand the importance of small local business being part of the majority of this marketplace. What can people do right now to prepare to apply for their licenses? Because we keep telling them to read the regs, and some are saying they're ready, and I want to speak to this from a person that has not only worked in New York State, but across many states. I've heard so many people say they're ready, and then actually when you sit down with them, they're so far from ready, right? And so preparation actually takes a little bit of time. And if you actually know what you should have ready and set up, that will help you in terms of your applying for your license, getting your business up and running, and avoiding delays. Is anyone on the panel, can you speak to what these small local market business leaders can do to prepare for medical license and or an adult use license?
I'll take a stab at it, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic, but if they intend to get in the industry, then they gotta learn what the industry is. They have to read the rules and regs. There's different entry points, there's different types of business models that they wanna have. They're gonna have to decide that and how they can participate. But the government itself and the law provides for there's training to the Auto Expungement Task Force that we currently had 41 individuals who took advantage of it. Government paid 70% of the cost with hopes to them to provide training on cannabis business, cultivation. It was 4 different classes that are being offered. It's currently suspended in the interim, but that are being offered as a government sponsor. This is the law provides for this, where the government is paying. I think it's 60% of the cost of the courses. So individuals have a chance to get information to prepare themselves. There are individuals right now who have done their own research and have started preparing their land, building fences, and there are individuals who decide they're going to have a dispensary and they know that the rules are going to call for a vaulted room and certain distance away from a school or a church, and there are
What is the
individuals
distance
contemplating.
right now?
I think if I remember it, it's 250 or it's 500 feet.
But you're asking about small businesses, correct? Okay, so first you would want to make sure that you know which category you're applying for. So if you're not applying for a license, but you're applying for a permit, you want to know that because the requirements are different. There's different residency requirements for the licenses compared to the permits. The application process for the licenses are extremely stringent. Background checks, you need to disclose all your financial interests. So you would want to have all of your documents and papers and everything in order. If you're applying for a permit, there's less requirements. They don't necessarily need to have good credit, but they have to be able to demonstrate that they have the actual cash to fund the operations, right? So you would want to first determine which category you're applying for, license, permit, third-party vendor certification, and then review the requirements for those and to make sure that you meet them. There's some members of our community who may have been subjected to the criminal justice system before all of these laws were passed. You would want to make sure you go ahead and get your records expunged. So government, the Office of the Governor, for instance, are doing automatic expungements for a certain category of convictions. And then there are other laws out there that allows for additional expungements, and you'd want to go ahead and take care of that because that could take as long as 3 or 6 months. So there's all these little details that you want to start taking care of now, so you're ready to apply.
And that's part of that preparation.
And I hope you all are taking those notes down, because again, if it takes 3 to 6 months for that, you shouldn't be just sitting there waiting. You should still continue to do whatever you need to do to prepare for that license type that you would like to apply for.
And this information is available on the OCR website.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Positive just expressed that a lot of that information may be available on the OCR website, and so you could avail yourself of that. Then also, as one of the examples that we can put forward is that if you're interested in, let's say, microcultivation, for instance, one of the requirements is that you have a farmer's license. And so we've had a number of individuals who come to the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs. They've gone through with the Department of Agriculture, got their farming license already in place, and hold a current business license, a commercial farming business license. It's literally $1 for that license. And so those, one single solitary US dollar. So those.
Can you repeat that again?
Can you say it one more time?
I'm just using the example of the microcultivator, saying that if that's something that you're interested in, one of the prerequisites is a business license or approval from the Department of Agriculture, and the evidence of that approval is the issuance of a commercial farming business license from the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs. It's not going to say permission to cultivate cannabis. It's just that you are a commercial farmer for whatever reason. So as a small business interested in moving in that direction, having a commercial farming license is one of the prerequisites that you can easily navigate and have completed and out front, that you don't have to do that at the time when you're now going through the application process.
And I know this is a different topic, but I just want to squeeze in before I forget. Earlier you spoke about schools and house of worship. So for schools, that would be 250 feet. And for school or house of worship, for school, 250 feet. And for house of worship, 150 feet. For the cannabis dispensary license.
Thank you. Well, that's important, especially as people begin to look at real estate. So we talked about licenses, but I will tell you that one of the issues that we're faced with in the mainland and the States are unlicensed operators. Unfortunately, not only our regulatory offices, but our law enforcement is faced with how do they address unlicensed operators, since we have decriminalized, right? We can no longer arrest, but these are individuals that are operating businesses unlicensed, more likely selling products that are not tested. And so, given what is happening in the States, can anyone speak to how the VI may address these potential issues once you are issuing licenses? Can I start with you, Keith?
So one of the recent changes to the law was the establishment of an enforcement division within the Office of Cannabis Regulation. And that enforcement division would be able to inspect upon no notice in most instances. They can pop in, do inspections, seize, I think Mr. Tricoche explained, they can seize, pull product off the shelves. They can shut you down. If you don't renew your license in time, they will come and yank it. So the OCR has very broad enforcement authority. They can revoke your license or permit. They can suspend it. They can essentially shut you down. And if you're making the investment to get a license, you would definitely want to watch that. The people who never enter the regulatory scheme would still be subjected to the enforcement division of the OCR, more than likely working in conjunction with the VIPD and potentially federal law enforcement. So just like, we've been operating unlicensed cannabis businesses for decades, in the Virgin Islands, so the same thing that's been happening, oh yes, you didn't know?
It's
So the same,
I like to call it the pre-existing market.
right, so the same enforcement that they have always been subjected to, they would still be subjected to.
Anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, just well said by Attorney Key. The other feature that the DLCA is concerned about is our licenses would give you the permission to conduct activities that are not intersecting in that way with cannabis-related business activities. And so, if you are found to be conducting business that is not in keeping with your license, you can also risk losing. If you are a licensed entity, you can risk suspension, termination, revocation of your existing business license. So really, I think the practice and preparation for entering into this new phase of the market is really to get your ducks in order. Make sure that you're following along the line of what is allowable. And I know earlier in our discussions, folks were saying, well, you know, it's really sometimes quite arduous to filter through some of the legalese and the language of some of these documents. And I'll say, folks, we are in the age of AI. We're in the age of artificial intelligence. Drop the
And they're
document.
lawyers, they're these things called lawyers.
Nice plug, nice plug. Please identify the appropriate attorney and people who have a background in these matters. But I know there's a whole lot of individuals that are sitting around and they're trying to figure out, you're going through just trying to navigate the 102-page document. And one of the things is probably just ask them questions, drop it into an AI and just ask them questions and see what are the regulations, what are the costs, what are the prices, you know. You're filtering through the document, you're trying to find it, even if you drop it into your word processor and you ask questions like, what are the license categories, you know. Take some time, get through the process, and familiarize yourself with the information that is presently available. You will be better for it.
Do you want to speak to a little bit of the enforcement? And I know that it goes through different offices, but Mr.
Tricoche.
I'm so sorry.
Tricoche. Miguel.
I was trying to be more formal up here. Tricoche. I got it.
That's good. That's we just go with it. Just go with it.
Forgive me. But by the end of the day, I had it right. But would you like to speak to the enforcement piece? Because I think, again, I recognize that enforcement happens not only in the OCR, but also there's some areas which I believe it touches in your new division that you're working, so you're formally with the legislation, but.
With the legislation.
Yes. So, people are breaking the law. They're operating illegally. We have one office that will deal with it, correct? But then, will your office also be responsible for enforcement as well?
The LCA.
So are you speaking from my present capacity?
Present capacity, that is correct.
I can't speak to that.
Ah,
I can't speak on behalf of the judiciary,
got it.
right? But frankly, because our job is to uphold the law, right? Not create it, not give our interpretation of it, but to uphold the law. So I will speak to it from consumer division standpoint,
Okay.
what that look like, right? You have several components, some of which that you've spoken about is the licensing portion and ensuring that you have the proper license for what you intend to do. If you intend to be a retailer, then make sure you have the license that reflects that you're a retailer. If you're going to be a distributor, then get that license. If you're going to be a manufacturer, if that license is available, then get that license. In my tenure, what I saw was overlap, right? Some of it intentional and some of it not intentional. If you're a retailer, you can't distribute. You can only retail, which means you can't sell to your buddy down the road because you're able to bring it in, and then you're able to sell it again to somebody else at cost, right? Because now you're just not a retailer, you're distributing, if you will. And if you don't have a distribution license, then you are now breaking the law. So depending on what particular piece of the industry that you intend to get into, or if you intend to get into multiple aspects of the industry, you need to make sure that you have the proper license. Now, DLCA is tasked with enforcing those rules and regs when it comes to licensing. So you will be paid a visit by inspectors and the enforcement team from DLCA. And not only are you looking at it from DLCA, but to Attorney Walker's standpoint, OCR will also have an enforcement team. So now you're looking at possible multiple violations, because it may not just be that you don't have the proper license, which could be a slap in the hand and a $200 fine, but you don't know how far down the road that you might be, where this might turn into something criminal. Right? You don't know. So the important thing is, from the onset, as Assistant Commissioner Graham was saying, if you're getting into the business, you have to do your due diligence to understand the business, to understand what you're getting into, and be very particular and deliberate about what part of the business you want to get into, and then follow through. Make the decision, and then follow through with the steps to make that decision a reality. You have, he mentioned AI. You have AI, you have reference material. You have other companies or other individuals in other states. Like, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right? You have access to the rules and regs here for the Virgin Islands. You have access to attorneys like Attorney Walker. Use the resources that you have, because once you get into the business, you don't have an excuse as to, I didn't know. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. The information is out there. Make sure you do your due diligence, and make sure you read, follow, and get the information that you need so that you're a successful entrepreneur.
Thank you. Do you have anyone else to add?
You have the opportunity to be strategic. So the legislation and then the rules were drafted to provide as much opportunity to people here as possible. So for instance, if you're aiming high for a dispensary license, what the law says is that 51% of the owners must be residents. So what does that mean strategically? That means that there are people who want to enter this new industry who are not able to meet the residency requirements. So what will they have to do? They will have to partner with someone who's local to make sure that they're making up that 51%. So, you know, we have the tendency sometimes to encourage each other to aim low. The legislation is drafted in a way for you to aim at whatever level you want to aim at. So in addition to that, there's a social equity and justice component to the legislation, which gives a 15% advantage to certain groups of people. People who have been impacted by the criminal justice system when cannabis was illegal, people who, female business owners, veterans. So you can very strategically put together a group, form a company, form a cooperation, however you want to organize yourself, and basically leverage your residency. The residency requirement is extremely strict. So it allows for a lot of leverage for people to partner with outside people who may have the experience from running these businesses in other jurisdictions, and of course, the cash to successfully apply for a license. So you really want to become familiar with those aspects of the law and as well as the rules.
We're almost done, folks. I've got a couple more questions. Is home grow allowed currently? Home grow?
Nothing is allowed currently.
You need a license
And a medicinal, when you have a medicinal patient's license or card, you'll be able to grow personal grow 6 and 6 when that happens.
6 immature, 6 mature plants? Okay.
Correct, as well as sacramental users. If you're certified as a sacramental user, you also have a limited capacity to home grow.
So can you explain,
So as a patient, they'll have to have a card. As a sacramental person, like, how do you then identify?
Register as such.
So the way that the law and the regs are constructed is it allows an organization to certify with the OCR as being this faith-based or religious organization that incorporates cannabis into its religious or faith-based practices. And that organization would have to persuade the OCR that their members have to meet all of these requirements to confirm that this particular member is part of this faith or part of this religion. The most obvious one would be Rastafarian, right? So you don't have to be dread to be Rasta, but you also have Rastafarians that eat chicken. So how do you determine who is really a Rastafarian, right? Are you a Rastafarian, Nelson?
Yes, I'm a
Okay, I'm not, but I have big fake locks, so you don't know, right? So you haven't, what you would do,
acknowledge the divinity of His Majesty.
what he said. So what you would do is you would have an organization that has these, and they already exist. There's, I think, at least 2 or 3 now.
Okay.
But you would have an organization that has these qualifications, and if you meet these qualifications, you are considered part of this faith. You certify with the OCR, and all of your members would have the opportunity to home grow in a limited capacity, and the group as a whole would also have the opportunity to home grow. They can't grow for commercial purposes, but they definitely can grow sufficiently to support their religious practices.
so how much would they be able to grow?
So personally, I believe it is 6 flowering and 6 immature, if I remember correctly, and I think it's slightly higher for the group collectively. So I'll delve into that in my presentation. I think I have it on one of my slides.
Okay,
It's a ratio of 12 plants per month.
right. Oh,
And just for those who are wondering, that is on page 56 of Act 8680. When it comes to sacramental usage, it's very straightforward.
Really happy to hear that, because that is important, and that's something
And
that,
that's unique in our
no, I was just going to say that, we're always here, this is why we connected. And again, and you guys heard me talk about it yesterday, the work that I've been doing with some churches in the state, in the states, to really help them to open up to cannabis education, right? So we can help destigmatize the plant. And so hearing that this is what they're doing here in the Virgin Islands, it's the only place that I've heard this done. And so shout out to the Virgin Islands for doing that. We'd love to be able to see more of that on the state side. And also shout out to the Virgin Islands for not taxing patients. Patients need their medicine, and so you have to understand how important that is that you all have done that, because the last thing you want is to hinder a patient for the access of their medicine because of additional costs. Okay, 2 more questions. We're almost there. And I'm hoping that I'm answering a lot of your questions on you all's behalf. So I did, in my research, I did read that about 3/4 of the tax revenues will go to a general fund, 15%, and you all correct me if I'm incorrect here, 15% for behavioral health programs, 5% for homelessness, 5% for youth programs. What I've heard time and time again here is education is critical. I know that the VI has its CEL program, and kudos to the university for having that program. And positive, you also mentioned that there was some courses that were being offered early on and put on pause. Perhaps, are there any other talks of adding additional education to the fund, and the reason why I say that is, you know, will that help educate law enforcement? Will that help educate community churches or whatever have you? So it's just something that I thought was interesting, and I'm happy to have you answer that, Senator James.
But just to highlight some, it speaks to the study of economic feasibility of developing a cannabis market. It speaks to the study that agronomy research being conducted worldwide relating to industrial cannabis. It speaks to research on promoting Virgin Islands cannabis and cannabis seed. It speaks to the study feasibility of attracting private funding for the Virgin Islands Cannabis Research Program, and all of this is under the University of the Virgin Islands Cannabis Research and Development Program. So it is very broad, so it's going to be going on for years. It's not just a one-time thing. Many topics will be covered, and hopefully we can encourage more young people to tap into this as far as technology, because technology is definitely the future. We spoke about AI many times, and we want to make sure that with these research groups, that the legislature continue to fund it. Because if you don't fund it, then we have to depend on outsiders to do our own research. We have a unique way of planting and growing in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm not saying that we do not want to incorporate what's on the U.S. mainland, but we definitely want to make sure that when it comes to the Virgin Islands strains and the different things that we're producing here, that we can capitalize on that and to benefit our people.
Senator James is also selling himself short. So what he's not explaining is that there was a lot of compromising to be done when this was passed in the legislature. And you had proponents like Senator James, and you had opposition as well. And one of the areas in which they were able to find some areas of compromise was in the distribution of the revenue generated from the cannabis industry. Am I correct? Yeah. Right. So, and he was very instrumental in that. And that's where you see so much distribution of those funds, because senators who may have needed to be persuaded were persuaded with the knowledge that funding would go to one of their,
Makes sense.
what they consider to be important.
Please.
Initially, and I was there during the initial time of that, and I had a concern when I was in the legislature pushing, because I wanted to see like the fund be bulk, like I would say block fund, so you could do specific key things, but to compromise, that's always the situation. But I definitely would like to see, like, in my mind, what did cannabis build? What did cannabis do specifically? I don't want it to get lost in a lot of administrative fees here, and that's why I'm hoping that we could see something like that, Did cannabis build a research center here in the Virgin Islands that's world-renowned, and people coming from all over the world, because we're developing strains here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the first place that America kisses the sun. All of these things are things that we could use as branding, talking about branding. Anyway, I'm sure.
No, and that's a great point, because, and I do keep coming back to New York because that's where I'm from, but one of the things that we fought for in our MRTA, which is the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, is that a percentage of the taxes reinvest in communities that were most impacted on the war on drugs. And so while we had to compromise for law enforcement education, we said you also need to allot some of that to communities that are low income, right? That their streets are not paved the way that they should. Their schools are not getting the funding that they should. And so I'm happy to hear that, and I do understand the compromise, and when you want to get something across the line, those are compromises at times that have to be made. And it doesn't mean that it can't be adjusted later on, but that's a start. Last question, because I know that, again, the executive director was announced yesterday, and everyone's probably waiting. Well, when are things going to happen? When will we see results? I imagine that given that she was just announced, that there's going to be a little bit of time that's needed for staffing, for getting some messaging out there. And so to sort of soothe concerns, can anyone on the panel speak to what does timing look like? Because I imagine with the new executive director just announced yesterday, that means that she is going to need time to adjust to her new role, but also get the staffing. Would that be accurate?
I'll start first. Things are ongoing as we speak. So it's not like everything halted because the director had resigned and there's a gap. There's things currently taking place. Like right now, you can register. Registration has begun for caregivers, sacramental organizations, sacramental users, practitioners, and patients. You can currently go online and start to you can get your processing, get your license for those things.
And everyone knows where to apply for that?
www.ocr.gov. And you can also, right now we are also awaiting some contracting to be done for the seed to sale contract. All those things are currently going through procurement and going through the process. So there are things being done that you wouldn't see anyway behind the scenes. Yes, the new director is going to get acclimated to certain things, but there are things currently taking place. There's a expungement task force. There's a team that meets on behalf of the governor, an internal team that meets to ensure that we are connecting the dots. There are things that has to happen with the Department of Health relative to moving on, establishing a governmental lab. So there are things taking place right now. So I don't want to give the notion that it's totally halted. Yeah, I get you on that. Thank you.
And to add to what Mr. Positive Nelson mentioned, there is no perfect bill. So Act 8680 will continue to be amended. And without going in details, we are planning to convene a committee on economic development and agriculture hearing. The sponsor of the measure is Senator Alfred. There were some recommendations made by several attorneys and individuals like Executive Director McCarthy, in which we have right here. But for those who are tech savvy and know how to maneuver the internet, go on www.legvi.org and look in the Committee on Economic Development and Agriculture hearing, the last one, and look at the testimony of former Executive Director Hannah Cardi, and you can see some of the stuff that are pending as far as legislation. So on the executive branch side, there are things to do, but we also have a responsibility. But we were also waiting to see what the conversation would look like with the cannabis rules and regulations to make sure that we do not put things in place and then have to go and change it. So continue to monitor the conversation as far as the legislative agenda. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I know that I only have time for one question because we went over, and the brother sitting at the first table here, I know you had a question. So can you stand up and ask your question, please?
Yeah, my question was about testing on the islands or within the islands. Are there any reliable testing sites, or is that something that's still being developed?
Not at the moment. There are no testing sites at the moment. The Department of Health has purchased some equipment and done some calibration, and we're talking to see where they're at. There's conversation, and Ms. Cardi had already established an agreement with lab in Puerto Rico where we can send things to for testing, but no, and there's been some conversation with individuals who have come to me with saying that they have the wherewithal and the interest to want to establish a private labs. There will be private lab, and there will be a government checker sort of lab.
And is there, what type of license would that be for a lab?
That's what I mentioned earlier, a cannabis testing facility.
Okay, folks, that was an hour and a half. Hour and a half. I want to thank all of our panelists today. I know I asked a lot of questions, but I hope it answered perhaps some of the questions that you all had. I took this panel seriously, and I'm going through regs, and I know that you all are still working on things and still developing, and everything takes time. I've experienced that in multiple states, so please know that I know that it's coming, and I expressed it yesterday. I want to see it good and strong and healthy right here in the Virgin Islands. I know that we'll have another panel later talking about economic development, but I just hope you can all just give an applause to this awesome panel. My
my name is Key Walker, and I'm the owner and founder of my law practice, which is Walker Legal. It's based in the Virgin Islands. We have 2 offices on St. Croix. I'm a graduate of FAMU and Penn Law. Someone from FAMU? Okay, all right. All right, so we have someone related to Rattlers in the house. So I also went to Penn Law. I was prior managing counsel of the Virgin Islands Legislature, which is where I acquired my legislative drafting experience. I'm an advisor to the Virgin Islands Justice Initiative, and if you're not familiar with that group, they're the ones that lead the charge for expungements in the nonprofit area. Around 2019, I was engaged by the St. Thomas Chamber of Commerce and later the Office of the Governor to provide legal advice and advocate for the passage of Governor Bryan's proposed adult use legislation. And a major part of that is now Act 8680. I was also assigned to work with the Office of Cannabis Regulation to prepare regulations for the medicinal cannabis program and then later the adult use cannabis program. Most recently, I drafted the legislation for the automatic expungement of unjust arrests that just passed this week that Senator James, did he leave? I told him to sit down. But he was the champion of that legislation. But I did not do this alone. So let me introduce Tippy, Alfred. You want me to introduce you? Okay, because I would like to. All right, so Tippy is a graduate of Harvard University and Yale Law School. He did all of that studying to become a musician and a music producer. He's founder of iGrade Records. He's recorded and produced at least 26 albums for various artists, including Midnight Band and Pressure. He was an adjunct professor at Columbia University's Department of African American Studies. He's the chief researcher and writer for at least 3 members of the VI legislature, so he's a drafter. He was instrumental in drafting the STARS Act, the International Banking Center Regulatory Act, our current cannabis law, and our current rules and regs. He also serves on the VI Industrial Hemp Commission and the VI Real Estate Commission, and then I ran out of space. He also speaks 4 languages. He's been Emmy nominated, and what am I missing? Grammy nominated, sorry. He's been Grammy nominated, and he competed in the Olympics twice, right? Once? Okay, so I think I've covered Tippy. All right. So we'll jump into the law. So do you want to kick it off, Tippy?
And maybe just one backup. About 12 years ago, the illustrious Senator Positive Nelson hired me to draft the decriminalization law, which I also worked on, which is a landmark legislation in the VI to stop arresting people for cannabis possession. So big up Positive. The Office of Cannabis Regulation is section 777 of the law, the VI Cannabis Use Act. This section of the law outlines the roles of what is known as the OCR, the Office of Cannabis Regulation. It's guided by an 11-member cannabis advisory board, and it's headed by an executive director who was recently appointed, Ms. Moorhead. The OCR issues the rules and regulations, which are meant to amplify the law. Rules and regs are sort of a law in greater detail. The rules and regs can't stray from the law, but it's going to offer more detail on the law. The OCR establishes an inventory tracking system, seed to sale system that you all discussed yesterday, issues licenses for cultivation, manufacturing, and sale, all of the various license categories you heard about, issues permits for micro-cultivation, adult use lounges, and third-party vendors, establishes the merit-based application process to select from competing license applicants, very critical, potentially contentious issue that needs a lot of clarity and transparency. So that's what the law and the regs were designed to provide, full transparency to the process, because I know a lot of Virgin Islanders have been suspicious about how that might go down, the awarding of licenses and permits. So I just want to emphasize that was something we focused on in the drafting, was transparency. Enforcing cannabis laws, which obviously is the role of the VIPD as well. But you can imagine the OCR has an enforcement division under its mandate that will be inspecting, regulating, and in some ways policing the legal grows. But VIPD, of course, is going to be involved in any illegal activity. Enforce cannabis laws to include conducting hearings and issuing fines, suspensions, and license revocations, conduct investigations, and protect confidential patient information. And here again, remember, we have a two-track system because we inherited a medical marijuana framework from a law that passed prior to the adult use law that Senator Nelson passed several years ago. We have a pathway in this current law for medical patients, as you well know. And this is something that the OCR is empowered and there to protect this pathway for patients, to make sure patients' rights are respected, to make sure patients have this pathway to have all the documentation they want and they need. All right?
So any questions about that so far? So this is just what we have identified as probably the most crucial duties of the OCR, but there is probably 4 or 5 times more functions that it has, but these we think are the key ones. So when you, as Tippy explained, it's a 2-track system. So there's a medical cannabis component that's found in section 779 to 784. The users under the medicinal framework are referred to as qualified patients, and the distinction is made because they're afforded more rights and benefits than the average adult user. They, for instance, they have an increased possession limit. That's twice the amount of a typical recreational user. They're allowed 4 ounces of cannabis and 2 ounces of cannabis product. They're allowed to personal grow, whereas recreational users are not. They're allowed up to 6 flowering plants and 6 immature plants at a given time for personal use. And there's actually a Bill of Rights in the law. Now, some of the rights in the Bill of Rights do apply to recreational users, not all of them, but all of them apply to medicinal users. So there's a list of ailments that qualify for medicinal use. It's pretty broad, so almost anyone could probably become a medicinal user. So if you're seeking to have these broader rights, you may want to consider qualifying under medicinal use.
And no sales tax.
And no sales tax. Sure.
So right now, at the same point I'm at the dispensary, the doctor's able to write a prescription. Can you have a medical card even though you can't get medical marijuana here?
There.
The cards are in, yes, real soon there'll be a possible.
Okay. Okay.
Right, and it's my understanding that OCR right now is actually reviewing applications and certifying physicians.
Okay.
Because you have to be certified as a physician by the OCR to prescribe.
There's one registered, I think he spoke on the first day, Dr. Perez.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the only registered practitioner.
Okay.
So, any other questions about this? Oh, sure, hold on.
Yeah, I think there's just been a lot of question marks about the clarity of the current law, and maybe on the next slide, Key, if you don't mind. Obviously, right now, there's no licenses issued for cultivation, so if there's a doctor prescribing, there's no source to fill that prescription. There's no dispensary yet. So there's currently no pathway to take your card somewhere and purchase. Okay? But there's been question about, is the law inactive or not? And regarding possession limits, I'm gonna tell you my personal opinion, to be Alfred, is that these possession limits that are described in the law are active right now. It doesn't say at the time of promulgation. Now, of course, there are no licenses issued, no permits issued. So cultivation, distribution, sale is not yet active. There are no licenses. But the possession limits, which for adult non-medical users is 2 ounces of cannabis, 1 ounce of cannabis product, which is oils or concentrates. This is your current possession limit by law. And when the medical cards are issued, it will be 4 ounces. Your personal possession limit would be 4 ounces of flower and 2 ounces of cannabis product. Not all of the rights and affirmative defenses apply to a recreational user, meaning that as a recreational user, you are not afforded all of the rights that are talked about in the Act regarding potential employee protection, regarding documentation of your medical need, etc., which may be very important for people, especially the elderly population, where cannabis has been stigmatized for 5 decades, might feel apprehensive about getting a prescription, and they want the pathway of medical marijuana. So that's why it was kept in place, and I think that's a good thing.
So, from a criminal defense perspective, the government takes the position, because licenses have not been issued yet, that you're prohibited from possessing. And that's a clean position to take, because police officers right now wouldn't necessarily know what to do if they stop someone who's within these limits. Based on my experience, I would say that you may get stopped, your stuff may get seized, but ultimately you couldn't be prosecuted under the current status of the law. So it's a little gray, it's a little fuzzy, but that's where the middle point we are.
But undeniably, with the decriminalization law, you're allowed 1 ounce for no, you might be issued an infraction, but the VIPD, to my knowledge, has never issued any infractions to this day. So you are definitely, without any legal question, allowed to possess up to 1 ounce without criminal punishment.
But I concur with the 2 ounce, I concur with you that the 2 ounce should be considered active at this point.
But just don't tell them where you got it from.
Quick question, going back and forth to, before you next slide. When you talk about getting medical cards for patients here, did you offer reciprocity for folks outside of VI to, if they come to the island?
There is reciprocity, and there's a process for it, and it's actually, I think, purposely streamlined, because we're also catering to cruise ship tourists. So they have a limited window of time to right, so.
And then you have the European countries that now is legal, Germany for one, that they're gonna have their medical cards coming over here, so that's great.
So we'll move on to the licenses. You wanna take this one?
These are the various license categories. Again, there are license categories and permit categories. Licenses being more substantive. Cultivation licenses, and in parentheses are the limits, the upper limits. The OCR has the discretion to set these numbers lower than these limits if they see fit, but they shall not exceed 15 cultivation licenses on St. Thomas, 15 on St. Croix, and 5 on St. John. Do you remember the plant count for cultivation licenses? Does anybody remember the plant count? There are various tiers, but I believe it's 1,000.
500 and 1,000.
Positive.
But does micro grow fall into that cultivation license?
No. Micro grow is a permit, and there is no limit set in the law on the number of micro cultivation permits. All right. So the cultivation license is designed for farmers, for commercial growers who want to sell their product to local dispensaries. All right. The whole question of inter-island transport is a very tricky one. I don't know where we currently stand, but at some point we're going to have to iron out this issue to see if there can be cultivation markets that open up within our territory, where St. Croix farmers can supply St. Thomas dispensaries, because obviously St. Thomas is going to have a way higher consumption with 5,000 cruise ship passengers every day, some percentage of which like to smoke ganja. So you're going to have a disparity in the consumption on the islands, so it would be great. I really hope that Positive and others in the government are making headway onto getting the permission we need from the federal authorities to allow inter-island transport. Right now, I don't think we have that, but
We don't.
that's a whole other question.
And the permission is needed because the waters between the islands are federal, right? So,
That's debatable, but we're gonna leave that.
Cannabis is, well, they're.
That's not debatable.
The water, that's a fact, but there's a there's precedents in the island of
Massachusetts, Alaska also has precedents where TSA has allowed Alaska dispensaries to transport cannabis by plane. So there's precedents for permission, but you still have to ask permission. We are a colony of the US federal government, don't forget that. Cause we're still a colony, bro. Better believe that. All right, so moving on.
But OCR is working working on it. So OCR has been meeting with Homeland Security. They've been meeting with Customs, Border Protection, and they've had discussions. The idea is to arrive at some sort of MOU or understanding, because not only do you want it for purposes of manufacturing, it also helps us with the cannabis testing facility, because if we can't transport between islands, then each island, including tiny island of St. John, is going to have will need to have their own separate cannabis testing facility, which is a bit tedious.
And expensive.
Where does the retailer fall into this, who doesn't want to dispense but only wants to have products, edibles, oils, etc.?
Manufacturing license.
And they,
But they would not be able to retail.
that's my
The only
question.
retailers,
Who does not want to
No.
actually have flour?
the retailers of any flower or product are the dispensaries. If you want to be a manufacturer, you would supply the dispensaries with your product, right? And all of the dispensaries are going to be required to supply from a diverse array of producers, meaning there is vertical integration, which is something we should say, that a manufacturing license can also hold a cultivation license, can also hold a dispensary license. You cannot hold a testing facility license and those other categories, but you can hold cultivation, dispensing, and manufacturing. So the temptation might be for some dispensaries to only sell their own product, but the law doesn't allow that. It requires that a certain percentage be got from third-party producers. So that's going to encourage a market from various producers, including micro-cultivators. There's a percentage requirement that all dispensaries purchase a certain supply from the micro-cultivators. So there will be a built-in required market for micro-cultivators. Yes?
So when you look at your, coming from the States, when you look at 500, 100, 500 plants, 1,000 plants, that's very small. Those would be considered micro type of licensing type in the States, what have you. Are you guys concerned about capacity, meaning growing for biomass for production of products that are tinctures or topicals, as well as flour, as well as pre-rolls, having a variety of different products and only having a license that only is able to produce 1,000 plants? Are you concerned about capacity and having and supply and demand?
Okay. Well, for one, it's 1,000 flowering plants.
Okay.
You can have up to 3,000 immature plants on the top tier of the cultivation category. So 4,000 plants is a major operation. And tropical growing, unlike California, if it's sun grown, we can grow year round. We don't have an April to November season. All right, you can, as a farmer, you can put out new plants every 2 weeks and reap every 2 weeks if you want throughout the year. We have a unique climate. In the regulations, it requires the OCR to put a ratio between indoor and sun-grown cultivation. So there's an incentive there to make sure that we have diversified the cannabis community. Some like outdoor, some like indoor. The character of our Caribbean tropical climate means that we can grow some very unique outdoor cannabis. So the regulations will require that there is a ratio to keep some semblance of balance, because many people prefer the taste of indoor marijuana. It's much stronger usually, but if we're trying to brand VI cannabis as something to be exported around the world eventually, it's important that the sun-grown market, the outdoor growers, also have a place in this. So it's meant to have a diverse array of cultivation styles and licenses. Moving on, dispensary licenses. These are where, again, any retail for cannabis flower or product, all of it has to happen in the dispensary. There would be up to 7 on St. Thomas and St. Croix, and up to 3 on St. John. You know, I don't know if these numbers will eventually need to be adjusted upward. Of course, the legislature can look at that at a future date, but for now, we're gonna have to scale up this industry step by step here in the VI. We only have 40,000 people on this island of St. Croix, 45 maybe, and we can't transport even to St. Thomas. So it's a closed market right now. So I think it's gonna start out 1 or 2, and then the OCR will issue another 1 or 2. And you might get up to 7 within the first year or 2, and we'll see how it goes. That's my prediction. Research and development licenses are designed to cultivate new strains
This can also apply to a company that wants to sell seeds and sell clones, which is a major part of the industry. Genetics is a huge part of what sells in the dispensaries, and the intellectual property of genetics is a major, major component of the cannabis industry worldwide, and will be even more important when there is national export at some point in the future. So the law envisions this as a category of development for the Virgin Islands to have seeds and cannabis strain research licensees operating in addition to UBI, as Positive mentioned. Finally, testing facility licenses. We need at least one in the territory to start if we get federal permission, but likely there will need to be one on each island. The cost of establishing a testing facility is not small. I would think it's over $2 million with equipment, but it's something that we have to have in place before we start. So I hope there's talks on this ongoing right now, because we can't get out the gate without a testing facility. Everything sold has to be tested. That's the fundamental process of keeping safe product. Yes?
Just to piggyback off what you're saying, good afternoon. I'm the current hemp director of the Department of Agriculture. So to answer that question, it is about 2 million, and that's without talking concrete. That's very much a stateside, not a galvanized structure. But where it's different for me, opposed to cannabis, I can move product to Puerto Rico to the lab that Positive had mentioned, but it's different here, so that's one major. We talk about timing and things like that. We do have to think, oh yeah, it's law, but we just can't start something tomorrow. So
You said you have permission now to ship to Puerto Rico for testing samples?
For hemp.
For hemp only?
Yeah.
Well, hemp is federally legal,
That's what I'm
so you don't really need permission to ship that.
Yeah, what was bringing this back to just we had time, when we talked about time earlier, not because it's legal today.
Got it.
I mean, everything just moves tomorrow, because little things like having a testing facility means that you can't move forward legally without being able to say this is what we have as a program.
Thank you. And then you had a question?
I did. So I wanted to know if there's any conversations about opening applications incrementally. I think my concern is like similarly with the taxi medallions, where younger individuals might not have an opportunity to even enter the market, because everyone kind of comes in, they have the experience, the years, the revenue to get these licenses, and then younger individuals miss out on opportunities.
Yes, the rules call for phases. So the OCR will decide, we're gonna disperse this number of licenses over this period of time. It won't be the full array, all right? So, it's probably wise to apply as early as you can in the process, but don't think that you would be left out entirely if you don't make it in the first round. The rules call for 3 different rounds of license releases with their coordinating dates, so the public would know when they can apply.
I just have one question. With the research and development license, is there going to be a flat number on that?
Yes. It's not written in the law, but the OCR in the rules should have said it. We can look it up. I'm sure somebody has the rules here. We can look at that. But there definitely will be limits.
And be able to flower them as well?
No, a research facility will be able to flower just for research purposes. Oh yes. Yeah, I think the rules allow for up to 100 flowering plants for research purposes, not for sale. Obviously, if you're developing strains, you have to bring them to flower to see what you're dealing with.
But generally, when you're looking for a strain, you might go through 1,000 of just one type, one strain, just to get that one.
Right, but there are limits. I think it's 100 flowering plants. So it's not meant, of course, not for flower distribution, only for research. But it can also serve as a form of nursery, as a form of clone and seed source for all of the micro cultivators and cultivators in the territory. So it's a pretty important role.
Because with clones, you might need to take a lot of clones.
Yeah, the plant count will reflect that there may need to be thousands of clones or seedlings in the inventory of a research and development licensee. Yes. Questions?
Going back to the medical thing, if, let's say Dr. Perez writes a prescription, I get a medical card, there's no dispensary here, can I get it filled
I don't know what the laws are in Cali if there's reciprocity, but I imagine many states will allow you. But again, this will be a adult use and recreation and medical program. You don't need medical card to access cannabis in the Virgin Islands once we're up and running. Which is why a lot of people are confused. Well, what's the whole point of the medical program? I said it earlier, it's to allow the pathway for people who want the legal protections, the reputational protections if they feel. Maybe they're an elderly member of their church and they want to have a card to say, this is why I'm using this devil's lettuce, or whatever they used to call it. Or a member of government, whoever feels they might need that authority to show why they're using this plant. And this is, we're in transition here. We're transitioning from a plant that's been unfairly demonized for over 100 years. A plant made by God. We can't call God a criminal.
Do you guys have any movement on like how you guys want to see locations, ultimately officially, the way you can?
Not you guys. I hope you're talking to the OCR. Where they locations? Yes. I think there's definitely going to be a lot of consideration given to balance and locations and making sure that they're geographically spread out around the territory, around the islands. There will be limits in the towns. I'm not sure what the number is. It may only be 2 per town. But obviously, yeah, the OCR has discretion on numbers and choosing the licenses, what's most suitable for the community, who meets all the requirements, and who has gone through this merit-based, point-based system. Which again, there will be published scores. So if you're denied an application, you will get to see where your application scored on the point-based system. That's the transparency we spoke about.
And the last question, have you guys had any conversations about the qualification for something to be VI branded, like the branded product?
Well, that's irrelevant until there's national export. Remember, we can't ship anywhere. We can't even ship to St. Thomas.
But there's been conversation, so.
That's envisioned, right?
So, those people who might be familiar with Governor Ryan, he's an economist and he's a visionary. So when he envisioned the rollout of a cannabis program, he was thinking about branding a VI product. He's thinking on a larger scale. He even initially proposed tax benefits for the development of strains and research in this area. Not enough members of the legislature agreed with his vision. He hasn't given up on it, but the idea is for this to be a new revenue-generating industry for the government, but also an economic driver for people of the Virgin Islands. So he's still committed to that, and we still have conversations with the legislature where we're seeking amendments, and Senator James can probably speak to that. We seek amendments to try and push more of that vision into the cannabis program, okay? So application requirements, as you've heard already, you have to be 21 years of age, you must be a Virgin Islands business, you must not be convicted of a disqualifying offense, which is defined as a felony in whatever jurisdiction that person was convicted of the crime, and the person has to have served their time and this is where it gets confused, it has to be a felony, and the charges would not be considered a crime under the current VI cannabis law. So, selling, not a crime. Selling and killing, that's a crime. So that's a disqualifying offense, right? And then of course you would have to have served your time. You must have the available funds within your control to operate the proposed business. And I say your, but it's not necessarily dealing with just one person as an applicant. It could be a group of people, it could be an LLC, it could be a corporation, it could be a religious faith-based organization, whatever, constitutes the applicant. That applicant must have the available funds and they have to establish that to the OCR. You have to disclose all your financial interests, and you have to pay the application fee, and you have to submit the application on the forms that are going to be provided by the OCR, and most importantly, you have to meet the residency requirement. Which is next slide.
Is there a whole slide on that?
There's an entire slide on it.
See, that very contentious issue, but I think we did this justice.
We here in the VI are in a territory, island-based territory, very susceptible to outside influence, outside flooding of markets. We want to do the best we can to make sure that this industry is first and foremost for bona fide residents, not for people who fly in with a green rush to come in, which is why we have a very stringent residency requirement for the licensed categories, not for the micro cultivation. So for the licensed categories, you have to have resided in the territory for 10 of the last 15 years before applying. There is an exception for those who graduated from a high school or who temporarily relocated due to natural disaster, etc. So 10 out of the last 15 years, which means many people who want to be a part of this industry, as Attorney Walker said, will be locked out until they partner with a bona fide resident. So us residents are in a very good position here to establish ourselves as majority owners, and not just in name only. There's regulations to make sure that that majority owner title is not just some figurehead and a company really runs the show. There's regulations to ensure that it means control as well. Question?
So is the relocation due to natural disaster and maintaining, or is it or maintaining? So if I relocated, do I have to also maintain a residence while I relocated?
No, so there's essentially two ways. So you have to be currently a resident and have resided for 10 out of the last 15 years, or you could qualify under 29 BIC 1003-9C. So that's defined in the second section: a person who has attended a school in the Virgin Islands for at least 5 years or more, or is a graduate of a high school of UVI and is registered, or of UVI and is registered to go to the Virgin Islands. This was inserted at the last minute. I remember exactly who did it. It was Frankie Johnson, it was Senator Frankie Johnson, because he was concerned that people may have been disqualified if they were displaced because of the hurricanes, right? So that's inserted. So those are the two ors, but you have to maintain residency in the territory under either.
So that was my question.
Right.
So it's on the board.
Yeah, and who is subject to personal income tax in the territory for the entire period that they hold a title to a license or a permit. So once you become licensed, you have to continue to prove your residency. If not, you have to divest your interest. Okay?
Again, that's stringent by any standards, 10 out of the last 15 years. To be frank, it may get challenged legally in the future, so I urge all of our local residents to take advantage of it now before it gets potentially challenged. But I think even if it does get challenged, we have some strong legal minds to defend it and defend our right as a territory to not be subject, because no other state would have this particular risk of getting flooded by outside interests like we would. So, the residency requirement for micro cultivation permits is different. It's a cumulative of 5 years, 5 years total, but
Out of 7 years.
5 out of the last 7 years, but 3 years prior. So if you have 3 years continuous residency and 5 years out of the last 7 years residency, you're eligible for a micro cultivation permit, which I believe is up to 100 flowering plants. All right, a medium-sized grow that can supply dispensaries, can supply manufacturers who make tinctures and oils. This could be a very vibrant market, only open to registered farmers, as we mentioned earlier. So it requires you to go through the steps of getting a farm license from agriculture. But the micro cultivation category is an important area for spreading this economy out, especially to the legacy growers. All right.
Well, you have real blocks, I have big blocks.
I want to take this one because this is, as was mentioned earlier, this was kind of historic. We are the first under the U.S. flag to honor sacramental rights in law, and that's a serious accomplishment. So big up all the fighters, President Nelson and others who've been fighting for this for so many years. As Attorney Walker mentioned, it doesn't mention Rastafari in the law because that would be a violation of religious preference under the Constitution, but it honors sacramental rights, generally speaking. So it's not restricted to the Rasta population. It's open to any
organization that can establish itself and prove that it uses cannabis sacramentally. Yes, Father.
We know who to beat in.
Yes, yes, and it's important. Our law has a lot of honor and recognition of the past in it, whether it's the social equity component or the sacramental right component, recognizing cannabis didn't show up out of nowhere. In many cases, it was the Rastafari population that brought it to the community, that highlighted it, that advertised it, that made children aware of it, that made people aware of it. So we definitely have to make sure we honor that.
And the flower child and the hippie.
See that. See that. So, sacramental usage is enshrined in the law. It allows individuals who are card-holding members of a sacramental organization that is registered with OCR to grow up to 12 plants, 6 flowering and 6 immature, must be over 21 years of age, again, must be part of this organized religion or faith that is registered, may not engage in commercial activities with the grow. I mean, if you have a sacramental grow license, you can still become a license holder, nothing to stop you there, but the 12 plants that you grow would have to be separate and only for your personal consumption. There's a collective sacramental cultivation certificate allowing the group itself to cultivate, and again, the ratio there is 6 flowering and 12 immature for each member. So if you have 100 members, you could have 600 flowering plants in a collective plot to be shared among the members, not for sale. All right, and this is a major thing that I hope different organizations take advantage of, because again, it honors the right of Rastas and others to grow this plant and have it used without the government involved. The government will be involved in checking to make sure you have your paperwork, your card, and there would be an annual fee not to exceed $100 per year to get this sacramental grow card. But beyond that, you're free to grow your medicine as long as you comply with the law. So I think it's a major accomplishment.
And this is where people should also start thinking strategically, because religious organizations, and let's just use Rastafarians for an example, would be included in those group of people who've been negatively impacted by the criminal justice system, which means they get the automatic 15% advantage in the merit-based application process. So a strategic thinking group of Rastafarians could leverage that, partner, and go after one of the more lucrative licenses, right? So there's just different avenues within the law to provide opportunities for people here, especially people who've been impacted by the criminalization of cannabis. Permits, microcultivation, that's
Again, micro-cultivations are small grows open only to licensed farmers. There's been question and debate whether micro-cultivation grows can happen on government-owned land. Senators felt like they did not want to potentially disrupt food production, so it was disallowed. So I think Department of Agriculture policy will be that you cannot have a micro-cultivation grow on government-leased land, government-owned land that you lease. I disagree with that. As my personal plug, I think a farmer can diversify their cash flow, potentially purchase more tractors, and as long as the regulation requires them to maintain food production, there should be no problem with that. But that's something to take to the legislators and the Department of Ag. Yes.
So as a so as a person with the first permit, you would have to grow on your land?
As long as it's not government-owned land, it could be any land. It could be land you lease or land you own, but not the government-owned farm leased land that you might operate on as a VI farmer. Many of our farmers farm on government-owned land.
But you have to show the OCR that you have permission from the landowner to grow on it. So don't just like roll out and pick any land and start growing, right? So yeah, so it's still regulated. Yeah, you can grow on your land, you can lease land as long as the landowner is able to certify to the OCR that they has given you permission to do that.
Yes, Senator James.
One quick question. So, like, the next one you asked that, right? So if the landlord, whoever changes their mind, what process you have in place to protect those individuals who may be sabotaging the landlord
get a good lawyer, but besides that, right? So the OCR has various other applications and forms that will be issuing. One is a change of location form. So that's just something you would have to go into the OCR and explain that you're having this issue. I imagine you would have a certain amount of days to do whatever you have to do with the plants that you have growing, and then find another location, and then the OCR would have to inspect the location, approve it, and then you can resume.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes.
Sorry, just a business advice. Anyone who's planning on growing somewhere on someone else's land, that needs to be a part of your lease or contract that you have. It should not just be an OCR form that you fill out. You need to have your own rights established separate and apart from their form.
Good point. In the back and then in the front, sir.
Can you get more than one permit if you have more than one piece of land?
No, there's only one micro cultivation permit per farmer. No, you cannot. But
more than one person can farm on the same.
yes, you could collectivize and have 7 different micro cultivation permits pooled together.
So could I have a permit for my land and lease the other piece of land to someone else?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Nothing to restrict that.
Get all your cousins together.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask, but I'm also gonna ask about the micro permit. That's, you said 100 plants?
100 flowering.
And what about that?
I'd have to check on the split non-flowering. I'm sorry?
That's not what.
I'll check it in the next break.
We'll get back to you, but it's in the rules.
Yeah.
A quick comment that is so key what Keith just said about being able to be strategic about looking at the language of the law and being able to make it work for you. Because I will tell you, there's no other state that allows for cooperative economics like this, where you're able to go and you get your cousins, if you have a piece of land, you get your license, you get yours, and then it's economics, you cooperate together, and then you create products and you create entry into the market. So just, I'm fangirling because it's so smart, and we gotta think outside of the box in regards to having your piece of the pie, and being so strong.
And just by personal story, we worked on this over the course of years. We had to keep going back to the legislature to try and persuade them to be a little more liberal in their thinking. And over the course of the years, we've been approached by different people on the outside who are like, oh, the residency requirement is illegal. Oh, people in the Virgin Islands lack the sophistication to operate a dispensary. Someone actually told me that, and I was like, I've been representing, well, let me not go that far. I've been representing people for years who've been dispensing, right? So I say that to say we were very, under the vision of the governor, we had a lot of latitude to really try and design a law that really benefits the people here. So it's woven all through the law, and once you read it and understand it, you can find myriad opportunities to enter into the industry.
Yes, and on that point, adult use lounge permit is a potentially very lucrative area of cannabis business. This is designed as an area for people to consume cannabis publicly. Now, this is an important part of the law because the whole law, Governor Bryan and the legislators who passed this law envision the VI as a potential cannabis tourism destination. And if you envision that but don't allow tourists anywhere to consume it, it makes no sense whatsoever. So, especially for our visitors, we need areas where they can legally consume. And these would be in the adult use lounge permits. Someone asked why we call it adult use lounge. It sounds like some sex show thing. I don't know why it was called that, but adult use, recreational use is part of the premise of this law. It's open up. It's for adults who are ready to use plant, just like they might want to use coffee or alcohol or whatever other substance. Yes, positive.
The term adult use versus recreational, people sometimes opponents was using recreational, like, use recreational.
Right, that's why we went away from that.
Separate, as far as advocates, be separated by saying adult use, and you're going to talk about adult use and not you recreational, you go on an interchange.
See that? Good point. But the adult use lounge permits would have to comply with the VI Smoke-Free Act, which means there still could not be smoking indoor. So this would have to be some semi-outdoor or outdoor area that would still have at least, I think, 100 feet from any line of where people would queue to be at a register. The area would have to be a certain distance from that. It'd have to be concealed from the public by view, and it'd have to be outdoor.
Or if indoor.
If indoor?
You have to have the right ventilation.
Yes, ventilation systems if indoor. Good point. So again, this is a licensed category for entrepreneurs who recognize that there will be a market for this, particularly in the tourist areas, particularly near Rainbow Beach, in Christiansted, in Frederickstead. So I hope people take advantage of this. Hold it down, Pastor. Cannabis use permit. Okay, cannabis temporary use permit. I think, are these for visitors? I'll have to double check. I think these are for visitors who may. Yes, thank you. So if there's a special event, a music event that wants to have a designated cannabis consumption area, they would apply to the OCR for that. Very good thing. As a concert promoter, I fully agree. Applicants must be VI residents for not less than 3 years and not less than 7 years during the applicant's lifetime. Again, that's for the permits. So less stringent than the licenses, but still only for bona fide residents. Yes?
Would that on-site cannabis consumption permit allow you to maybe partner with someone to sell as well?
No, not at all.
It's only for use, not.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been questions about stuff like that. Pop-up selling, not allowed in the law. Culinary, adding to food in restaurants, not allowed in the law. So we have to be clear on that. These are things to evolve to. If the market demands it, and if you demand it of your senators, then maybe we'll get there. Yes?
So the allowance would be a bring your own?
Ideally, you purchase at a dispensary and bring it. Yes, it would be a bring your own. You have to bring it. Dispensaries are allowed to operate their own lounges as long as it has a separate entrance and it's in a separate area. It wouldn't be in the floor of the dispensary, but maybe outside in the back or upstairs. So dispensaries may have them, restaurants may have them, you know, beaches may have them. Hopefully they're abundant. Yes?
Do you need to have any land zoning specific to any permit?
It would be subject to the same type of commercial requirements. You would, you wouldn't go to the old folks home and open up right there. You'd have to go to the appropriate zoned area. And what happens, especially with particularly with the licenses, applicants are going to be conditionally approved, right? Because you're making this investment, you're not sure if you're going to get the license. So you're not going to go purchase property or lease property, right? So you do your application, you do your plan. If you are awarded the license, it's a conditional license because OCR still has to go and inspect the location where you'll be operating your business, and the zoning requirements are going to come into that. So it's just like any other business.
So very important point there that you don't need your location to be set to apply, right? You don't have to have a lease signed or a deed to apply for any of these categories. It's a provisional license. You would eventually, of course, have to show the OCR your location and that it meets the requirements, but you can apply with a general plan that's not specific to one location, okay? Yes?
For zoning purposes, can, like, going back to having land, can it be in a residential area?
No. You mean a consumption lounge?
No.
Or any of these?
Micro cultivation.
Oh, I don't know. If you have a farm license in a residential area.
Right, and then the law,
Does it allow for residential?
what's restricted is really close proximity to schools, close proximity to churches, close proximity to the ports. Right, so residential is not a hindrance for growing. However, it can't be just any type of residential area because the OCR is going to take into consideration whether your neighbors object to whatever it is, whichever operation you're doing.
There are fencing requirements on the micro-cultivation rules and regs. So all these details are in the rules and regs, which are on the OCR site. So I urge you to look at it. Yes, homeowner association concerns as well. So, but again, it's only for licensed farmers, the micro-cultivation. So that's the first step, is going to agriculture and making sure that you get that license first.
So moving on to what the next steps are, please excuse my incomplete first line there. But when the legislature passed Act 8680, it also passed a companion piece of legislation that allowed for auto expungement of certain crimes.
8679.
Act 8679 and Act 8680. So they were passed together. 8679 deals with the auto expungement of certain crimes. And the difference between auto expungement and regular expungement is that with auto expungement, the executive branch of the government working with the judiciary is essentially identifying a list of people who had been arrested, charged, convicted, identifying that on their own and just going in and just automatically expunging those records, okay? So under a normal expungement process, you would have to file a petition, you'd have to get your criminal record, you'd have to file it, you'd have to wait 30 days for the Department of Justice to respond, and you pay a fee for filing the petition. There's some work involved with that. But for the crimes that have been identified in the legislation, those are being automatically expunged. Now, if you fall into the category of automatic expungement, you should still go check. You can even go one step further and go see Nelson at Serenity's Nest and ask him about the status of your auto expungement.
Yeah, on the auto expungement, the law, Act 8679, is automatic expungement for cannabis possession up to 2 ounces. There are not many people in the criminal justice system where that's their only charge. So I imagine right now your list isn't very long, positive, as far as people eligible for that. But it does enable the auto expungement task force to make recommendations on other classifications of crimes that should be considered for expungement.
Marijuana-related crimes.
Yes, marijuana-related crimes. And I think my personal opinion again is that distribution should be included in that. And someone who is convicted for importing pounds of marijuana, when companies will soon be able to do that legally, they should have that record expunged as well. So I hope you're opening it up soon, positive, and the people will be ready.
You consider the only thing we have an issue with is somebody who's been selling to children. We don't think those are going to be excused. Correct. We think that's what we're going to hold the bar on.
That's right. So now that the regulations have been passed, oh, go ahead.
So, on the automatic expungement, if you were convicted for the possession that I think you said it was like 2 ounces.
Up to 2 ounces.
And it was combined with the criminal charge that you were saying before. Even though you're not eligible for automatic expungement, you get your sentence reduced because of the.
If you're still serving, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
That hasn't been addressed by the legislation, but I think an argument can be made. I raised it in my last trial where I had someone found not guilty of a whole bunch of stuff, but guilty of marijuana conspiracy. And I argued that we were prosecuting someone for something that's essentially legal at this point. You know, the jury didn't agree with me, but you know, whatever. So he got that little guilty conviction. But I think arguments can be made. And the criminal justice system, as flawed as it is, it does allow for people to make arguments and make pleas. And I think that's something that can be argued. So what's next? So there are some amendments pending to the master legislation. Senator James? That would have released someone? I mean, when someone gets sentenced, they're able to argue about what their sentence should be. And I've seen myself and I've seen other attorneys successfully argue that marijuana is being decriminalized across the country and the court should take that into consideration. So depending on how liberal your judge is, they'll take it into consideration. I know of at least one judge in the territory who doesn't sentence people to jail for marijuana conspiracy. Even if they get convicted, they walk right out of court, right? So it depends.
One point to add, gun charges are a disqualifying felony offense. So the vast majority of cases where people are serving or serve serious time for cannabis, there's also usually often a gun charge as well. So unfortunately, the law would not allow anybody with a gun, federal felony conviction, not federal, a felony gun conviction to get a license. Maybe that's an area where the legislature can look at and see if maybe there's an expiration period. Maybe if you haven't had that in 15 years, or something to allow legacy growers who might have gotten caught up and have a gun charge as well. Now they're locked out of this industry for life. I don't think that's fair, so I hope the legislature can take a look at that.
And then in some jurisdictions that are debating the same issue, what they're finding is that people were overcharged. So sometimes what the government would do is they would charge you with the possession, they would overcharge you with something else to try and convince you to plead to the possession. So that's something that other jurisdictions have been looking at. Hopefully, the group that's being led by former Senator Nelson is also looking at that. Are there instances in where people were just really overcharged and should never have been charged with, a gun charge or an increased possession charge to begin with? But just to start wrapping up, so now that the regulations have passed, we do want you to know that there are amendments pending to the act. Because the act had been, and you were there, Senator James, and I think you too, to some extent, Tippy, senators were working in the middle of the night, like right before Christmas or right after Christmas, to actually pass the Act 8680. So there were different versions going around. There's some typos, there's some tweaks, there's some areas that need to be cleaned up. Senator James has been very helpful in bringing this to light and providing and having his committee serve as an avenue to get these areas of Act 8680 cleaned up. So Senator Donna Fred Gregory has ownership of that legislation. I know her office is working on it. And I would think hopefully in the next couple months, we'll have a cleaner version of 8680. Once that's cleaned up, the regulations will also have to be tweaked. That doesn't stop the OCR from working, but these regulations are not going to be the final version. The other thing that needs to happen is the Office of Cannabis Regulation now needs to be adequately funded so that the director can staff up, hire her enforcement team. She's going to have to hire consultants to review the detailed financials for some of those dispensary licenses in particular. In addition, there needs to be some sort of agreement or memorandum of understanding with the federal government to allow for the inter-island transport. So that would, if we can get that done, I think that will facilitate a quicker rollout of the cannabis program. Educate and prepare our community to apply for licenses and permits. Train peace officers, including members of the IPD, on what these changes mean. So no longer can an officer say, well, I smell marijuana, so that was enough reasonable suspicion for me to pull over the car. So those days are gone, and officers have to be retrained. And I think those are kind of just the key points. Did you have any others, Tippy?
I like that last point. Can you amplify that?
Roll out the cannabis program?
In 90 days. So when did the rules get promulgated? What date?
When the last signature is on it, I think, is the governor. So right now it goes through phases. After OCR, who just passed it this week, it goes to DOJ, it has to go to Lieutenant Governor, it has to go to the legislature, it has to go to the governor. So whenever that last signature hits that paper, technically the law requires the program to be rolled out within 90 days thereafter.
How would you define roll out?
You have to start issuing the solicitations for the licenses. Okay?
Clock is ticking.
Question?
What did I present yesterday about ancillary businesses? Thinking about how you can create business that not only helps the individuals themselves as business owners, but also the VI economy. And so I am super excited because everything that the organizers have put together in terms of learning about the commercialization of cannabis, learning about how to grow, and now today, this morning, we learned about the types of licenses, what's legal, what's not illegal. I believe that this last panel is going to bring everything full circle. So I'm super excited that my good sister friend, McCarthy, will be leading this conversation here as moderator. But I really hope you guys have taken a lot of notes, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of juicy stuff that was shared here today. Thank you. Over to you, guys.
All right, so the last panel of the day, and we're gonna go out with a bang. I'm McCarthy, founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, as well as founder and CEO of Black Buddha Cannabis. And I'm gonna moderate these gentlemen today and give them the floor to really share and talk about the economic development opportunities, funding as it relates to the new commercialized cannabis industry in the VI. So I'm gonna pass the mic, if you could just give them your name. Also tell them exactly what you do here and kind of your connection to economic development, and then we'll go down the road.
Good afternoon, my name is Clifford Joseph. I am currently the hemp director for the Department of Agriculture. Where I come in economically is, hemp is seen as any other agricultural crop, and I just know that it's a cash crop to the other crops that you can grow as an agriculture crop. So that's where I come in economically and how we could link. It's all the same plant, just a matter of THC levels. So whatever you can do to one side, really you can do to the other side. So.
Good afternoon, I'm Wayne Biggs Jr. I'm the CEO of the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, and we provide financing to entities that want to go into business, and we do everything from startups to basically mature companies, and we lend anywhere from $1,000 to about $500,000. There's some new programs under our federal programs, which unfortunately for cannabis, we cannot use federal funds, but we have a slew of local programs that we can use for funding cannabis-related businesses, whether it be the growing itself. We do have a special program for farmers and fishers, on which the cannabis growers will fall, but also we can do stuff for the hardware. And let me just say, the cannabis market is one market, but the hardware market, where the grinders, the pipes, the papers, all that sort of stuff is another market that I think we should be looking at. And I also want to say it's kind of a pleasure to sit up here on this panel with Mr. Joseph, because don't mind my gray hair. I coached him when he was 12 years old in the league. It's nice to see him here on the panel with me. And my gray hair, I started when I was about 12 years old myself, so we're the same age. But yeah, it's great to sit here with someone you've seen grow up to be a young man and come director now of this area. So congratulations to you. Good afternoon, my name is Miguel Tricoche. I am the current Assistant Administrator of Courts for the judicial system, but I'm not speaking to you from that standpoint. I'll be speaking to you from the standpoint of former chairman of the Office of Cannabis Regulation, the board, and as the former director of Consumer Affairs. So while these gentlemen may talk to you about the economic development portion, as someone who did the inspection and the enforcement portion, I'm going to talk to you about how not to lose that.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, Cliff. So before we get started, I want to just level set. I love level setting because it makes sure that everybody's on the same page as we get started, right? So again, economic development is programs, policies, or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community. And those type of programs and policies consist of financial, consist of tourism, it consists of all types of policies that will help to uplift the community. So the first thing I want to I'll leave this open for this group and you can answer the question. Have you or has the department, the government, have you quantified the potential economic opportunity that cannabis legalization can create for VI? Have we talked about that? Do we know what that number is yet, and why it's important? Anybody want to take that?
I'm not sure what the numbers are now, but I know when they were talking about legislation, it was quantified as far as the potential for growth, particularly in the tourist market. And I know we were trying to get in very early. We weren't able to do that, and some other islands beat us to it. But because we have such a large population, we figured that we can also capitalize on the tourism aspect, along with the medical, the sacrilegious, the variety of other areas. But the number is out there, but I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but it has been quantified by the government.
Right. So the thought being is that cannabis as a industry and bringing it to a new industry, these are new dollars, and the tax revenue that'll be generated, the economic impact consists of private, it consists of government, it consists of public partnerships. The monies that are generated creates that economic impact that I think most states and most localities don't think they got into cannabis just because. It was because of the financial wherewithal that would happen economically, right? Miguel, you talked about enforcement, you talked about inspection in your past role. Talk about the importance of that from a development side of this industry, because one thing about what's happening here in VI, you're rolling out your medical program and your adult use program at the same time. And that normally does not happen. I have not seen that happen. Normally it is medical program, and then maybe 12, 18, 24, 36 months afterwards, sometimes longer, the adult use program comes in. So Miguel, I'm gonna pass this down. If you could maybe talk from your perspective in your past role, how that's important right now with the introduction of medical and adult use, and how that creates an economic opportunity for VI. And remember that we have 3 islands to speak of, St. John, St. Thomas, and St. Croix.
Thank you, Miguel Tricoche. So one of the things that we do here at the Virgin Islands, probably across the Caribbean as well, is that prior to cannabis and hemp particularly, with the 2018 Farm Bill, is that was something that was part of our culture. If you're a Rastafarian, we knew about using cannabis, right, for sacrilegious reasons. We've never actually been able to tap into that until now, right? And because of that, it provides an opportunity locally to be able to grow, to dispense, to distribute, to sell. And what's important about that is that we want that to stay here within the community. What we don't want is such an influx of outside interest that the monies that can be made in the Virgin Islands don't stay in the Virgin Islands. And that's key when you're talking about the economic development. It's not so much only getting monies as an entrepreneur to start your business. It's not so much getting the materials and the resources to start your business. It's a moot point if we start this business and those monies go elsewhere. And it doesn't help the community. It doesn't stay here. It doesn't impact the Virgin Islands and help develop the Virgin Islands from an economic standpoint. So from a former inspection and enforcement standpoint, and I mentioned this earlier, it gets to a point where it's manufactured here or you're buying it from an outside source. That is so key to making sure that you have that economic opportunity, because if you're buying bad product, then you're not going to make the money that you want to make, right? And in turn, it's going to give the Virgin Islands a black eye, because it's not just impacting your particular business, now you're impacting how the public views what we have here. And we talk about tourism as well. We want to tap into that part of the industry. But if we become known for having bad products, bad hemp products, bad cannabis products, and we're not overseeing, enforcing, evaluating that properly, then whether we want to tap into the tourism market or not, again, it's going to be a moot point, because those coming here will not be interested in that because of what's being said. So the very first thing from an economic standpoint that I would say is to make sure that when you get into the business, that your product is a viable product, the sourcing is viable sourcing, you're following the rules and regs for make sure that it's labeled properly, you're following the rules and regs for making sure you have the proper license. We don't want an entrepreneur to start a business and then you get shut down because you didn't have the license to do what you're wanting to do or that you're claiming to do. And what I'm saying is based on my experience where I've had to do that with stores previously. I've had to take products off the shelf. I've had to stop products from coming into the Virgin Islands where it gets destroyed. Now, is that the entrepreneur's fault? I'm gonna say in some cases 90% yes, because it is up to you to vet your product. It is not for the manufacturer who's sending it to you to make a bigger deal about who that manufacturer is, and to prove that I have a licensing, to prove that I'm registered in my particular state. If you're starting the business, you have to do the homework, because I've seen that product get thrown away, I've seen it get burnt, and you're paying good money to get that product here. And licensing standpoint, that is so critical to do it right the first time when you start.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
I want to piggyback off of Miguel just by saying that for years, like we said, we've been doing this in the Virgin Islands, but we've always done it grassroots. And I think what we need to understand is that we're trying to do it on a larger scale, and that comes with a lot of regulations and red tape. I grew hemp for the state of Tennessee before it was even a farm bill, so when we talk about red tape, everything has a tick, I know we have a tendency to be laid back here. I think once we understand that we are trying to do big business, and that comes with regulations, and if you want to be on the top stage, you have to do things by the standard. Even from an agricultural standpoint, for anybody that knows about Highland dairies, the issue with that, even from an economic standpoint, what happened was cruise ships used to buy our milk when they started to test for a certain protein. Yeah, the Virgin Islands government decided that they didn't want to invest into that technology, and our milk industry plummeted. So I watched this the same way. We can't have that same laid-back mentality. We have to do everything right the first time, making sure everything is checked, because now you are running a business. It's no longer you're in your backyard doing whatever you want. You do have checks and balances for everything.
I'll add on to that.
First of all, I want to hire you to work for us, because our mission at EDA is job creation, economic growth. We've added wealth generation and tax-based stabilization. So, I mean, you missed the wealth generation, but I'm hoping that all of you who are involved in that will create some wealth in regard to this particular business. But as we're talking about regulation, we don't do anything with anyone unless you're properly registered in the Lieutenant Governor's office and you're properly licensed. So, even if you're a farmer, I mean, there's a requirement that you have to have a license as a farmer. So you have to file your Schedule Fs. You have to visit the Department of Agriculture. They have to check you off the box. And I know both of us have some licensing background even before you go get your license. The license is only $1. So it's not hard to be licensed, but you just have to do everything right, or else you wouldn't qualify for any of the loans that we have, but much less, sometimes we get federal money there in grants. And we had a big issue in regard to, during the CARES Act, we got money for fishers. And these fishers couldn't provide their catch amount. They couldn't provide how much money they lost as a result of COVID. And so they were not entitled to close to $100,000 in free money because they weren't keeping the books and stuff. So you need to make sure that you're going into business, you're going to run it as a business. The SBDC is going to be here later on. They'll talk about the new agriculture business center that they have. But also we have an incubator where we concentrate on farmers and fishers. We have an accelerator where we try to move you to the other level. So we'll be rolling out some program for farmers and fishers. Take advantage of that and run it as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that, and I want to get back to Cliff's point is that you are doing it and managing, but not having the regulation. The regulation allows you to track dollar and cent economic. You're able to utilize that dollar, the dollar and cent of what you're generating and how the impact that you have in order to create more opportunity for yourself, in order to be able to quantify why the USVI cannabis is the best cannabis. Why? So that's the purpose of regulation. You're now able to specifically quantify what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it's going, and how it's impacting the community that you serve. And I want to go into my next topic, and Wayne, this might be more on your side of interest, is when it comes to investors and investors to the industry. We do know that this is a cash-intensive industry, have you thought about how we will court investors? How do we incentivize investors to come into the community, especially if you're talking about, commercialization and the grant and the equipment just for processing could be super expensive.
Yeah, we have talked about how do we get certain investments into the territory, and we do a lot of our investment attraction through tax incentives. Unfortunately, on the growing side, there's not tax incentives that we can do, but on the manufacturing side, particularly if you're manufacturing again the hardware, we can basically give you a 90% tax reduction on your income tax in regard to that. If you're a bona fide resident, any pass-through income, we can give you a 90% reduction on your personal income tax. For any real property that you own in the operation of the manufacturing facility, we can potentially waive all of the real estate taxes. We can waive all your gross receipt taxes. We don't have a sales tax here. We have what's called a gross receipt tax. So we can waive all of those gross receipt taxes. We can waive your excise taxes. And then your custom duties, if you're bringing in foreign stuff and assembling them here, we can get your custom duties reduced to 1%, from 6% to 1%. So there's a slew of tax incentives that's available in regards to creating a manufacturing type business. Again, not on the grower side, more on the manufacturing and processing side. And if you're doing manufacturing and you're doing wholesaling, then you could potentially qualify for these tax incentives. We don't do anything on the retail end. So if you're running a dispensary or something of that nature, we don't do any tax incentives on the retail end. But definitely on the manufacturing side, if you're doing any type of assembly, you can buy your components from Taiwan and China, whatever, and you assemble them here. Two things. One, you potentially can get the tax incentive. But two, based on your value added, now you can call that product made in the USA because you've added value to that product by just using the components from other areas. So there's a variety of incentives that we can provide.
Absolutely. So let me put you on game right quick. So when he's talking about Chinese, Taiwan, or what have you, I would say 80% of the hardware that you see, the vape cartridges, packaging, things of that nature that you see. Let me tell you something, the ancillary side, somebody in this room is going to create a packaging company and a hardware company. You're not going to touch plant, but you're going to sell your products to people that are producing products here in the VI. And it's coming from China, it's coming from Taiwan, it's coming from India. Let's be clear, in the US, that's where it's coming from. The shipping, the cost that it takes to tax, if you have this really awesome opportunity to defray that is going to be that hits your bottom line. That hits your profit margin. So I really want to thank you, Wayne, for sharing that. Do you think, Wayne, that if we see movement from a descheduling, we've been hearing buzz, the last couple of weeks, do you think then if we see the descheduling or the rescheduling happening, that will change also where maybe retail as well as cultivation may be able to take a part in some tax incentives?
No, I don't see retail, actually, obviously it's a local program, it's not a federal program. I don't see retail do that because then we would have to open it to all retail businesses. And then we would affect our tax base in regard to that. Part of it is tax base. What we try to do is we try to attract the investment from outside, so that's money that was not in the territory, and now it comes into the territory. So if we're reducing, let's say $100, and they're rebating back 90%, we're still getting $10 of money that was not here before. So the program is created really for new money coming in to the territory, but I don't see it going to retail.
Okay, yes, makes sense, thank you. All right, so what we're gonna do right now is I wanna go into some really segments, very specific segments that are a part of economic growth and opportunity. And they're very specific to what you gentlemen, where your expertise is as well. Now I'm gonna start with agriculture and Cliff. Talk about and share with us, how do you vision and imagining, and have you seen it with other different commodities here in the VI, where you can leverage the growing demand for a product and be able to certify it as organic or certify it as locally sourced product? Have you thought about what that looks like for cannabis under your department?
In regards to him, under the USDA Farm Bill, you have to be tested by a panel of mold, potency, and these different mitigations. So that on its own certifies you to be able to say, it's certified that we have certain aspects. So again, it puts you into a different it's not medicinal, but it allows you to know exactly what you're getting.
Sure.
So that on its own allows you in a market to say, hey, you know, instead of paying $10 for a product, I expect to pay $15 or $20 because I also have to pay to certify this product too. So and that on its own for a lot of users, especially new users, because I think that's what you're trying to get to. That's very comforting to see that, you know, my product is safe, or what we would consider to be safe.
Right.
Can I touch on that?
Yes, yes.
I don't know if many of you recall a few years ago we had agriculture used to provide these stickers that were called Virgin Made, and that differentiated the products that were here locally versus the products that were imported from a variety of different areas. So you could stick that sticker if you were a local farmer licensed Department of Agriculture. They would expect to make sure if you were doing yams, they didn't come from the Dominican Republic, you were trying to pass them off. I am a member of the local food and farm council, and the council also now has a local component to it, and we're there to assist farmers, and growers will be counted as farmers also in this, but also we're going to have some grant money that's going to be available for matching grants. So if there are any grants out there for whatever you're doing and you don't have the match, you can get the grant and it will provide that match for you. And that match can be anywhere from 10% to 20% of the grant. So there's a lot of available assistance for farmers, but you will have to put that local food and farm council sticker on it and a Virgin Made if it's locally made. So we'll be able to differentiate local products, yes.
Absolutely. Do you think that, I know we talked about hemp, right? So we talked about legalized cannabis and hemp. There's a couple of projects, there's one in particular that we're a part of with M4MM. The Climate Smart Grant is one that is being able to benchmark how many carbon credits you get for farming hemp, right? Do you have any concern about farming hemp as well as farming cannabis and the contamination and creating buffer zones when it comes to that, as that is kind of rolling out? Because we don't want the hemp industry to go away, but we wanted to see the introduction of the cannabis industry. Any thoughts about that at all?
So when I initially was hired, it's a conversation that I had with both the assistant commissioner and the commissioner, as far as even if we just looked at it from the side of the illegal growth. Even if I had everything sectioned off and somebody decided to grow something illegally, would we worry about the cross-contamination? Of course, because this is a new industry, so to speak, there's still studies being done. I am connected to a professor in Florida that is currently doing studies of how close of parameters you could get without contaminating plants.
Yeah. For those that don't know, I don't know if Jamal is in here or not, but if you don't realize, hemp and cannabis, they're kissing cousins. Like there's the cannabis sativa plant, but there is something about the fact that you can grow hemp and it will contaminate your cannabis plant, and you don't. And there was a concern about growing hemp for industrial purposes, like creating hempcrete and things of that nature, and needing lots of land to grow hemp, and the concern on the island of the cross-contamination if you also have a thriving legalized cannabis industry. So I'm glad that you're tied into Florida, and if there's ways that we can help bring more resources to understand what that looks like, I would love to see that happen as well. So yeah. All right, so the next question I have, the next segment is tourism. And I would love anyone on the panel to talk about the tourism, the economic opportunity of tourism and cannabis, and how do you market it? How do you measure it? How do you prepare for it? I think Ms. Walker talked about in the bill, there is a reciprocity opportunity for individuals if they have their medical card to be able to come here. But you have cruise ships on top of cruise ships that come to the island. How do we make sure that that tourism side, and even creating cannabis tourism here on the island, what does that look like? And I will just, let me know.
I think one of the things that we will address, I think by leaving it even legal age at 21, it helps us, because just like how we had to check in with COVID coming here, I think there could be something that's easily accessible for the same for the cruise ship. So therefore, when you get off the cruise ship, there is a thing that is well understood that you have to have this QR code, whatever the case may be, to allow you to participate in what we do have here in the Virgin Islands. So I think one way we look at it from tourism, from that standpoint, but I just think not needing a passport to come to the Virgin Islands is a big seller. The fact that our culture allows it to be as open as it is are big sellers, because again, if you go anywhere else in the world, there's a lot more restrictions. So I think the fact that we are U.S., the fact that it seems that we are allowed to create our own laws here in the Virgin Islands, when I said we have our own tax laws, our own drinking laws, our own drinking limits, I think that we have a chance to create something that nobody else has, and that on its own is marketable.
Yeah, I love it.
We've been getting a lot of inquiries in reference to creating wellness facilities here, whether it be ecologically friendly, so eco entities, cannabis entities. We've seen now there's a nice wellness facility that's down on the Frederiksted side for rehab, and not rehab as far as alcohol or illicit drugs, but rehab for injuries. So there's more and more interest being grown in reference to wellness and cannabis, and creating small boutique type hotels here in reference to those things. So I would say we have to get our Department of Tourism involved in that. They do the bulk of advertising for the territory. So I think it's very easy for them to put, some sort of labeling on the cruise ships or wherever that, we're cannabis friendly, 420 friendly, whatever you want to call it, in regard to those areas. And I'm sure we can come up with some catchy phrase, like I think right now they're using a different kind of vibe. So, I mean, if we're doing cannabis, it would be a different kind of vibe, right? So, and naturally driven, if you look at the two different ones they're using. So, so I think there's opportunities there. We're seeing a lot of interest being generated now. But Cliffside here in reference to creating some sort of quick QR that people can get to show that they're over 21, I think can easily be done. I traveled through the European Union during COVID, and it was very easy to get a QR code, and you had to get a QR code to go into facilities and stuff, so it wasn't difficult to do at all. You could go to any pharmacy and you show them your cards and your age, and they just verified it, and you got the QR code right there. So there's opportunities for us to do that and make it as simple and as easy as possible to make sure. Again, as Cliff said, because we're not as heavily regulated as the States, I think we have opportunity to take advantage, We don't have closed container laws, we have open containers, so we've already allowed that, but I think we have to be very careful how we do that with cannabis in regard to that. So again, we do have the no smoking type regulations here also, that you can't smoke within 30 feet of a facility for tobacco. I think cannabis, my understanding is it may be regulated where you can't necessarily smoke in public. You'd have to go somewhere and create like smoking lounge or something like that, like we do for cigars and stuff. But definitely, I think there's many opportunities to basically advertise and take advantage of the tourist market.
Yeah, Miguel, do you have any feedback?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, to what he said, was when you take a look at what that would look like, when you take a look at what that actually will look like, right? And let's visualize this for a minute. A tourist ship comes in, tourist comes off, person is 21, they can use it, right? One of the things that we do have to invest in is a designated use zone, right? We have to think about it. Tourists sometimes are here for only 8 hours, 6 hours. They're not here for 24 when you're talking about a cruise ship, right? Somebody who's coming here and who's staying here for the week, that's a different thing. But when we look at somebody who's going to be on the island for eight hours, and maybe when they come off the shift, they want to spend some time using cannabis, we now have to look at designated cannabis use zones, which may not be related to a lounge, right? Because now we have to talk about where is that lounge located? Does that person have to jump into a taxi to get there? We will start thinking about tourist ship comes into Frederiksted. What does that look like in Frederiksted?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where can we have a designated smoking area? In Frederiksted, very similar to designated smoking areas for cigarettes.
Yeah.
So just to add to that, as we develop those policies and procedures geared towards tourists.
I love Miguel. You can tell your background is enforcement and regulation, because it is it's so clear. And let me tell you something, I can appreciate your position because it's so important. Because we sometimes want to go and make it happen, but we have to think about also, if you have a cruise ship that says no, how do you get them to support the legalization on the island without going against their own policy and procedure, and how do you regulate that? So you may have these buffer zones, you may be able to only get it in this area, and you have to think about those things. And it's not our job to think about that right now, but that is something that we as vested interest in what happens in the VI, that we need to understand that there's going to be rules, regulations, and enforcement of making this all work together. So thank you, Miguel, for your insight. It's so awesome. One thing I will tell you, so I'm gonna break this down to the ridiculous, right? So if you heard about the tourism, it's the education, but imagine the festivals, the vacation, cannabis tourism, the wellness facilities. I love it's like it presents a different kind of vibe. Someone in this room is going to capitalize on tourism. Right now is when you need to be thinking about creatively, what does that look like as an ancillary business, right? Maybe it's cannabis tours. And let me give you a piece of advice. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Put in cannabis tourism in Google. Go to Colorado where there's actually on Eventbrite and some of these different platforms, there's actually the opportunity for you to monetize an experience. Create that, and that's your business. That business is an experience that can get funded through SBDA and through SBA because it's not touch and plan. You are providing a cultural experience, and the way that you want to position it is in a way that you can get that funding. So I just want to encourage you, as you're hearing about the economic opportunities, this is one that there's someone in this room who's going to come up with something so creative and so awesome. So, all right, so let's go to the next area. Right here. So the next area I have is real estate and property development. What does that mean from an economic perspective? If real estate is going to be critical when it comes to retail, when it comes to if you don't own land from farming, but if you're doing inside grow, you're going to need to have real estate, you're going to need to build out, maybe it's warehousing. Your thoughts on real estate and property development as it relates to the economic growth connected to cannabis?
I'll turn it to Cliff in a second because agriculture provides the land leases in many cases that farmers use, but I think that's going to be something you're going to really have to think of carefully because being on an island, there's just limited amount of space that's available for a variety of different things, and you have to look at zoning, what is zoned for commercial, what is zoned for industrial, what is zoned for agricultural. So that's something that if you're going to be a grower and you want to grow in any quantity, you really need to think out carefully. I don't think on the dispensing side, there's going to be a lot of issues because downtown Frederickstead, downtown Christiansted, there's facilities available that you can potentially lease, purchase in regard to creating dispensaries of that nature. But if you're going to be a grower, it's something you really need to be thinking about now. How are you going to grow and what quantities you're going to be growing in, because land is very limited for agricultural purposes right now, and it may require you going to the legislature and getting some rezoning done if you own land currently. And then the next thing you have to think of is if you're trying to do rezoning, what do your neighbors think, and are they going to come out against because you're growing cannabis in that area and that sort of stuff. So there's a variety of different things I think you need to think of, and if you're planning to grow, you need to start thinking of those things now and start writing them down in reference to what land am I going to use, do I need to rezone, how will the neighbors feel about it, will that put an end to that rezoning right then. The Department of Planning and Natural Resources is working on their master land and water use plan, and how is that going to be affecting your facilities. So there's a variety of different things I think you need to look at in reference to land and development.
Anyone else?
And this is probably straying over into agriculture. It's something that you mentioned earlier. When you look at real estate and you're looking at growing, it is a very real thing about cross-contamination. We talked about that earlier. So now you're not only looking at what am I purchasing, where am I purchasing, but what's in that surrounding area that could possibly affect my crop. Now, if we look at biopesticides and pathogens that could affect the cannabis or hemp plant, now you also have to look at what other type of plants am I growing on my property that could affect my crop. What kind of pathogens, what kind of fungi, I hope I'm saying that right? That another plant could have, that could come and decimate my crop. So not only are you looking at the real estate costs, but you also have to pay particular attention to location, because it may not be something that you have. Your neighbor could be growing something on the other side that could affect your crop, right? And then, of course, that's gonna have a huge impact on your economic development, because if you went and you grew an entire crop, and then when it's time to harvest, it is gone, what do you have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. So you've got to look at the surroundings, you got to look at who's growing what near to that real estate that you're buying, and making sure that it's safe, and do the research to make sure that your crop, and when it's time to harvest, you're able to harvest your crop.
Something else I want to add, maybe you have to look at also if you're going outside or you're going to use going inside, you know, all of that facilities. I mean, we can help you fund the facilities to create, I guess, the greenhouses, if that's what you call them, on the cannabis side in reference to growing internally. I don't know if tower growing allows for cannabis, if that will do well in tower growing. So you need to look at a variety of different things, how you're going to get your crop to market. And again, real estate is going to be an important part of that equation.
And just to piggyback, in reference to outside growing when it comes to agricultural land, I think it was already announced that you cannot grow cannabis as of right now because it's still a Schedule 1 drug. As far as hemp, it's still on the table for ruling. I do not see the commission necessarily ruling against it. Part of what I'm writing into the hemp program is that for any amount of hemp that you grow, you have to grow at least 10% of something edible. So that on its own keeps the agricultural upkeep of what we are trying to do here. In reference of real estate anywhere else, I do think we do have a lot of buildings that are not in use, and I think that maybe the government could look into some of these buildings being used as facilities, as we, knock down buildings that might be in areas that allow you zoning already because of, the structure. So I think what we might have to look forward, moving forward, as well as, again, not reinventing any wheels, but using what we do have because we are already isolated, seeing what we can use to create facilities or even outdoor spaces, or even more people come together, so therefore we have larger facilities, or maybe everybody's doing the same thing all at once. So therefore what we're looking for is maybe more of a group effort moving forward, if these are some of the issues that we are running into in the future.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, if you're doing, and I'm not sure what type of processing is required in hemp or what type of processing may be required in cannabis, but the EDA is in the early stages of creating agricultural processing facilities here on island. So we're in the process of creating a facility in Frederiksted and one over in St. Thomas that we were doing it for farmers in regard to their crop. And I would imagine that if we can design it for any type of processing that cannabis may need, it will assist us in making sure that that facility is used as we intended and it is used and not just sitting there. So I will go back to my team and say, did we think about cannabis, did we think about hemp? And we'll do some research in the type of processing that's needed and see what type of machineries we may have to add to our plan right now.
That's wonderful. So happy to hear about processing facilities that are being created. Two other areas that we're going to talk about as we wrap up. Let's talk about the second to the last one is financial services. How can the financial service market be a part of this upcoming cannabis industry? And folks are going to need banking. They're going to need resources for their business. Any thoughts about how that economically will affect the financial services market here? I don't know if you have your own local banks, community banks, things of that nature, or do you think they're going to be willing to support this new thriving industry?
We don't have any community banks here in the territory, so I think banking is going to be a difficult part of it because they're going to fall under federal regulations. Where I think you may be able to get assistance in regard to that is through the credit bureaus and the credit unions that we have here. I should have said credit unions, not credit bureaus. But the credit unions, I think, is probably where you're going to have to do a lot of your banking locally right now until hopefully on the federal side, it passes and it's legalized federally. My understanding is, the little I know about the cannabis industry, is that that's one of the issues that many of the states have issues with in reference to have legalized cannabis. Is how do you do your banking? How do you do your funding, your money transactions in regard to your business? I'm not sure exactly what the answer is for that, but right now, other than maybe using the credit unions that we have available. And there are credit unions in Christiansted and Fredericksted, Mid-Island, so there's a variety of different credit unions that I think you'd be able to bank in locally. But as far as basically getting into Banco Popular or Oriental or First Bank, I think that's going to be a little more difficult because it's more federally regulated.
We have a question?
Yes, I don't know if this question fits into this bubble, but seeing that cannabis is not federally legalized, how does insurance work?
So there is there are insurance companies that are insuring, and that's the risk management part of our industry. That's really important. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. There is a company, Canna Coverage, C-A-N-N-A Coverage, is a Black woman-owned cannabis liability insurance company. Not only does she provide insurance for your brick and mortar, but she provides insurance for your employee and other different areas of liability. So there's even banks that bank cannabis, right? Some of them are mainland. My question was wondering if there has been conversations here on the island about those banking opportunities and even insurance opportunities. But I will tell you this, if you're someone and you're gonna have brick and mortar and you need insurance, I want to encourage you, if you don't know where to go, please to contact M4MM. There is no one, I'm not trying to be like this right here, but there ain't nobody in this industry that I can't touch and I can't make something happen, period, the end. And I'm gonna make it happen for my people, period, the end. So if you need something, do not go around here and like, oh, I don't want people to know. If you need support, if you need help, reach out to us. We will figure out how to get you connected so that if the resource is not here on the island, there is a multi-billion-dollar industry happening on the mainland, and those resources are there, and we'll bring them here. Okay? Yeah? All right. So the last area is employee and workforce training and employee workforce training. We have a brand new industry that's going to create job creation, that's going to create these new opportunities. The state of Florida, with their medical program that has over 800,000 patients on service, which is huge, was the #1 generator of new jobs in 2023. The employment opportunity that is on the horizon for the islands because of this industry is incredible. Would love for you to talk about, have we thought about that and the economic impact that will have on individuals now who may have a new opportunity, a new chance at something that was not here before?
Personally, growing up here in the Virgin Islands, I've always said, you can leave out of your parents' house and be 18 and making $60,000 at events, and that was a blessing. But when that stopped, and we had a chance to bring back Lion Trail, I'll never forget saying that the government should have really invested into cannabis at the time, mainly because you have a lot more people that are certified or knowledgeable in the area already, opposed to having to go for that type of training. Where I see this working for us, like I plan to be the sample agent for my program. There's a list of jobs that you could create, sampling, trimming, name it, and the list goes on. And now it's a new industry, you could be certified, and this is something that I think you could get a lot of younger people back into agriculture as well. Because again, to know that, I might want to indulge in the plant and I can have a job in that industry as well, I think that on its own opens up a invigorating market for the younger people in the community. And I think that's where you really have to focus on when we're talking about job creation and who is going to carry the torch.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, I don't think federal dollars can be used in reference to workforce training for cannabis type, since it's not legal on the federal side, but there are local dollars available through our Department of Labor, and they can do tailored training for a variety of different jobs. So as you're creating your business, you want to touch bases with the Department of Labor and see if they can assist you with any training matters that are there. Not only can they do training for individuals who are first time entering into the workforce, but they can do retraining, I think they call it, where Ovenza jobs left. Those people now need to enter the workforce, they can retrain them for other jobs also. So there are local funds available, and I'm sure they can use the local funds to do some of that workforce training in regard to getting this industry up and running.
Absolutely. Miguel, any comment?
Yeah, just one thing I want to add to that is, as we talk about the jobs within the cannabis and hemp industry, where you're actually touching product, cutting product, and what's not. Also remember there's a security aspect of that, where you don't have to touch product, you don't have to be certified, don't even have to know the product actually, right? Because that's huge. You want to protect your crop, you want to protect your investment, whether you have an in-house or a greenhouse, or whether you're transporting it. I'm going to add transportation into that as well, from point A to point B, because you're a distributor, you have to move your product from point A to point B. And as we know, there'd be nothing better than for me to steal all your product out of your truck while you're moving it from point A to point B. That's a reality. As much as we don't want to say it, that is a reality of that happening. So we have to also put things in place for that. So I say that from when we look at economic opportunity and job opportunity, there are opportunities there too, where you can be the Brinks for the cannabis business. Transported from point A to point B in special trucks. There's no reason why Brinks can only do it, or I should say, why a Brinks type of company can't do it for cannabis. You could use similar trucks, similar security, and you're moving product from point A to point B. So when we think about, as you think about getting into the business, there's so many different angles and dynamics that you can get into that's not necessarily I'm growing or I'm cultivating or I'm distributing or dispensing, and you can still get into the business.
With that point, thank you, Miguel, again, for just your insight. Know that Wayne is telling you, hey, here's areas that we can maybe support you locally, but federal dollars, maybe I can't because cannabis is still illegal, right? However, if you are someone that has a Brinks security truck or what have you, or if you're someone that is doing packaging and you're not directly touching the plant, you are a producer of packaging, some of those barriers can be mitigated, and your opportunity to get funding for training, for workforce development, all those things are there. So I just want you to think outside the box. Don't be so hampered in, and call your local folks. I'm sure, I don't want to make your phone blow up, Wayne, but can they call and maybe ask questions? How can people stay engaged?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, as indicated, the ancillary services is not a problem. I think it's more the growing and the touch of the product is where we find the problem. So if you're gonna do a manufacturing plan because you're gonna build pipes, that's fine, we can fund that with federal dollars. We can just fund the cannabis portion because you're growing cannabis. So there's a lot of ancillary businesses that we can definitely do. As a matter of fact, we were in the process of attracting one of the bigger hardware companies here, Organics, and we're this close, and then we had some issues over at St. Thomas and they decided not to come. But I think we have to make sure as a community that we're also ready for cannabis. And when I say that, I like the fact that we're taking small steps and we're making sure regulations are there and everything else, because once we step into it, we're into it. So we have to make sure we do this right from the start, and I'm encouraging everybody to make sure you dot your I's, cross your T's as you're entering the business. But again, think outside of the box. Look at the ancillary businesses that are there. If you want to do, I talked about a cannabis resort, and you may want to do a boutique hotel. We can fund the cannabis resort. We just can't fund the cannabis that you're using in the resort. So, and we could fund the cannabis resort with federal dollars, although that's where your market is at. We just can't fund, again, the cannabis that you're using in the resort if you have that dispensary in the resort. So come to us, talk to us. Our website is USVI-EDA.org, and our telephone number here on St. Croix is 340-773-6499. Feel free to give us a call. We do have the Economic Development Bank, which is a separate area that just does small business financing. Again, we can finance startups, we can finance companies that have been in existence forever. So we finance a whole wide range of areas. Sure, the website is USVI.EDA.org. And our phone number is 340-773-6499. And if you go on the website and you do info and you send it to us, our marketing department will read that email and get it to the right person so we can respond back to you. So we're happy to assist you wherever we can. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you in business. And we're providing, like I said, services through not only financing. We do have an incubator, so we have somebody that assists you from the infancy stages. And then we also do an accelerator. So if you're looking for additional markets, we have additional markets. If you're doing hardware, we also are part of the SBA STEP program, so we can assist you in exporting out of the territory. Again, cannabis we can't do that with, but we can do it with the other products. So we're a full-fledged wraparound service entity that can start your business and help you all the way to exporting. We also now have a trade zone. So if you're exporting and you're in a trade zone, there's certain benefits you can get in reference to tax benefits where you can move product in and out of the trade zone without taxes until it gets to market. So the trade zone runs from the container port to West Airport Road, and the north boundary is the Melvin H. Evans Highway, and of course the south boundary is the Caribbean Sea. So it includes the container port, it includes the airport, it includes FedEx, it includes DHL. I mean, so there's a lot of facilities. If you want to move product, you can move product. There's also a lot of Port Authority land in there, and Port Authority is willing to lease to you for a variety of different things. So again, we're there to help you. We'll assist you. Give us a call. We're happy to, assist wherever we can. 773-6499. Again, it's economic growth, job creation, wealth generation, and that's wealth generation for us as residents, and tax-based stabilization. So that's the 4 things that we look at.
I got it right?
Yeah, you got it right.
Yes, ma'am. Question.
You said that you would finance a boutique hotel, right?
We could finance that. So we would, because it depends on
So
the
you just-
Yes.
You could possibly finance the idea of an entrepreneur having a boutique hotel for smoking purposes, as long as they don't.
No, so this is what you do. We'll put you on game. All right, so y'all won't say Wayne said it, you can say Rod said it, right? All right, you what? I got you, Wayne. I got you, baby. I got you. So listen, you don't go in with the fact that when you create a business plan, your business plan, especially with an industry that is so sensitive as cannabis right now, and you're wanting to look for resources and funding, you don't go in with your plan when you first need your initial money to say, oh, I'm going to build this cannabis boutique hotel. Maybe it's saying, I want to create a small boutique hotel. You don't put all the different caveat, all the stuff that you want to do yet. You just want to be, you're an entrepreneur that has made the decision to create a small boutique hotel in Christiansted, St. Croix, Virgin Islands, right? And you go and do your business plan based on that premise alone. Now, once you get your funding, once things get going or what have you, I think, unless there's some caveats to that funding, if they say, well, you can't use it for this, and you want to ask those questions ahead of time, right? You want to make sure that there's no stipulations to that funding dollars. But I will tell anyone, if you want to build something, before you put the cannabis part to it, really, there's no business that there's not a business plan already there that you can be able to create as a foundation for your business. For a dispensary, you know what a business plan for a dispensary is? A pharmacy. For a cannabis-friendly hotel, it's just a boutique hotel business plan. Have your business plan together for what you're trying to do. Cannabis is just the caveat, it's just the extra on top, right? Yes, ma'am. And then Gia.
Prevention is her to her answer. So your question was about a hotel. Remember yesterday we talked about ancillary businesses? You're not selling cannabis. You're selling the state experience. Now, unless you want to end up selling cannabis at your hotel, then that involves license, and that's a very different entity. So the cannabis piece, it becomes
I'll get a little technical. I mean, when you look at industries, I mean, cannabis is a fledgling industry now, but again, because it's hospitality, there's something called NAICS, and we use what's called NAICS code, and you're not gonna see cannabis hotel, you're just gonna see a NAICS hotel.
Right,
Yeah,
and I
so that's
guess
where
my
you're gonna,
question is.
that may be your customers, but your hotel and your business is hotel.
So what we've been discussing is prevention is better than cure, right?
Sure.
So what if I do a business plan for a boutique hotel and then I can't have cannabis there? When laws are finally passed, I'm in the wrong zone, or I'm in the wrong, how do you prevent that?
Yeah, so that's a lot of research and understanding what you want to do and how you want to do it. You have to think about how do you market. So let me tell you guys something. There's a conversation about business versus hobby. Like, we're not here to create hobbies, you're here to create a business, right? So regardless of that business that you're going into, you need to do your research ahead of time to understand, is this business viable? Is this business, would I need a license? If I want to make my hotel cannabis friendly, would I need a license for this? Is this private property? I will tell you, like, I go to Boston, and this gentleman, he owns a private space and what have you, and it's 420 friendly. You know how he gets around consumption licensing, anything of that nature? He makes it where if you walk into the door, that you automatically sign up to be a member. So his place is a membership-based place. So it's a private place, he owns it. When you walk in the door, I don't care if it's a private event or whatever it is, you're signing up to be a member. So therefore he's saying, I own it, it's private, and it's membership-based. So therefore it's not for public consumption, it's for private. There's ways to work around stuff. Honey, it's ways to work around everything. Okay. This is what I'm telling you. You understand what I'm saying? So you gotta get your basic first and think about not monetizing right now, monetizing 5 years from now. How am I gonna monetize this hotel? How do I create revenue of this hotel? Who's my target market? You gotta do those numbers first. And if you want it to be that 420 friendly folks or what have you, you got to go and do the research to make sure that that opportunity makes sense for you from a dollar and cents. Or is there enough business that will come from that market? And if not, then you have to figure out exactly, is this something you really want to get into, right?
Can I touch on that?
Yes.
And I'm just using hotel.
Again, packaging goes a long way, because if you told me, if you came in and said, well, I want to do a cannabis hotel, there's a lot more questions that I'm going to ask than if you came in and say, I want to do a 420 friendly hotel. Because now I know your customers are regular customers, but if somebody is 420, you don't have a problem with them being there. I mean, so there's a variety. I mean, and so as you indicate as well, thinking packaging is really important, especially when you come in and you're trying to get financing, and it's how you package things.
Okay.
So you need to think carefully in reference to how you package. Because I may ask you, well, how many cannabis smokers do you think are going to be in your hotel? And you say, well, it's X amount, but if you say you're cannabis friendly, now you can capitalize on the cannabis smokers and the non-cannabis smokers, so you open your market and your numbers look a lot better.
Okay. Thank you.
We could probably have a part 2 of this conference just on business development and economic opportunities and the business side of it all. Because you guys need to be thinking about, if you own land or if you own a building, then you might want to be a landlord, right? But you need to also think about, we talk about workforce development. Well, who here has that experience? Maybe you are the workforce development training company for the island for cannabis, and you create a whole company just based on that. And then there's something like in Florida, we have Career Source, which is funded by the federal government. Now, I'm sure you guys may have a Career Source here as well. They will match dollar for dollar for your internal employees based on what you need. They'll bring employees that are signed up for employment. They'll pay half of their salary. You pay the other half. And all you're doing is saying, I'm a training company, right? I just want to challenge you to think outside the box and not think of this as a cannabis company, but think about taking regular stuff that people regularly do and how do you transition it over to the industry, okay? With that being said, we're at time. I want to thank my panelists, Miguel, Wayne, Cliff. Thank you so much. Before I choke to death here. I want to again put out there, if you're not connected, this is just a shameless plug to M4MM, please get connected. When I tell you we have resources for you, we do. And I am looking for a VI, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, or just one person to be our state director here on the island to get connected with us and be a part of our M4MM family. So if you're interested, let me know. But thank you so much, panelists, and everybody have a great day.
Let's
give them a round of applause. Thank you for this very useful information. I told you it was going to be information drive, so here we go.
Hello everybody, my name is Jack Percari with Loud Thoughts. I'm here with Daima Williams, the CEO of VI Canna Culture. Today we're going to be talking about their inaugural conference, so thank you so much for being here with me, Daima.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being here with us.
It's been an interesting conference. We had 3 days where we talked a lot about everything from the medicine to the culture to the policy. I want to start off, what excites you the most in the Virgin Islands?
Oh, for me, the Virgin Islands is home. And as it would be this week, the cannabis board just finalized the rules. And so we're at the cusp of rolling out cannabis opportunities for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so this cannabis is just in time to start getting folk to think about the industry and what they can do within this industry, whether it be cannabis or cannabis non-touch opportunities. We're looking at the economics of tourism. We're looking at security, supply chain management, education opportunities, business development, everything seed to sale. And so this is a very exciting time for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this cannabis conference is really the beginning of an awesome initiative to start bringing Virgin Islanders and their extended support systems at one table.
Right, and as we're talking near the end of the event, it's much more than just tables and chairs and people together. Talk to me a little bit about rewriting the narrative and how women work together and how we could, how you're looking to change business through cannabis.
Oh, absolutely. And so in my last life, I did healthcare administration and leadership. And so it's always great to work alongside like-minded people in general. But I think women play a very unique role in business development. We're mothers, we're leaders, we're champions, we're nurturers, we're business leaders, and so it has been an awesome opportunity to work with like-minded individuals in this space as we kind of put our vision to action and we start to create something that's really a nuance in the Virgin Islands. And so it's been a great opportunity to start seeing people network together and really build a platform.
Right, yeah, and with 8680, it definitely creates a lot of provisions for people to do that with the sacramental use and with all the other ways that people can now touch the plant here. How have you been able to get back to your journey? I mean, I know you said it wasn't so simple.
Oh, it's never simple.
Right,
it's
like
never simple. Yes.
you started this and you said there was a lot of soul searching involved.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, I didn't even know if this was really the right fit for me. And it's interesting because I thought, rolling it out, everyone's excited about this new legislation. It'd be easy for me to get sponsors. It would be easy for me to just get this started. And as it is, a lot of people are kind of uncomfortable with their brand association with something that hasn't been finalized. And so a lot of this had to have been out of pocket. It has to have been, despite not feeling necessarily supported, you got to kind of make it happen, which is committed to this. And so it has been an exercise in kind of finding your inner strength, if I will, but it has been incredibly rewarding because I've connected with so many people that are grateful that we're finally coming together to make it happen. And so to your point, as you observe, it has not been easy, but it has absolutely been rewarding.
Yes. No, that's beautiful. And for all of our viewers at home, this is something that is really on the cusp in the Virgin Islands. This is a part of America, but we should always recognize the cannabis story that is going on here.
It's unique in every space. I think for us as a U.S. territory, we often say no passport is needed. So you can get on a plane, usually the hub is either Miami, North Carolina, coming from the mainland, and you can enjoy just a fabulous weekend here under the sun. It's generally about 80 degrees all year round. The beaches are awesome, the drinks, the cocktails are awesome. We're known for our cuisine, and now we're looking at infusing that with the cannabis culture. And so there is so much opportunity. And so we want to encourage like-minded individuals, connoisseurs of cannabis, kind of curious, to really look at the Virgin Islands not just as a tourist destination, but business expansion. And the way the laws are written, yes, you have to probably collaborate with local individuals here to really sustain or create a business. But that is, we needed those protections. So as we move forward, we're really looking for those who are interested in really fostering growth in the Virgin Islands to really consider business opportunity, cannabis, touch, non-touch, all those investments are applicable to the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit about opportunity, because we're here at the Carambola. We got support from the governor. We had a lot of people who are in mainstream positions talking about this. What have you encountered any upheaval or anything along the way that was a roadblock that
So no, I wouldn't say necessarily. I think a lot of Virgin Islanders have been interested. Yes, we are very conservative as a community, so there's always going to be people who feel that cannabis may be a gateway to drugs, or they don't necessarily appreciate how it's being criminalized in history, but it's really more significant in terms of natural wellness and wholeness. And I will say, as a registered nurse and someone who is in healthcare leadership, not everything is for everyone. There are some individuals who should maybe not consider utilizing medicinal marijuana, but however, or cannabis, but there are some people, and I'm sure you know one of them, that cannabis has been instrumental in their well-being. And I will say, as a nurse, I myself have connected with so many people. I'm a cancer survivor. I speak to those who are going through chronic illness, and they will absolutely say that cannabis has made a massive difference in their life. And I think as an advocate for patients in general, and as an advocate for my community, I owed it to myself to do some fact-finding, some research, and what I came back with was, it may not be necessarily for everyone, but for those who can utilize it, it is essential.
Awesome, and I guess I want to wrap this up really quick, talking about your Virgin Islands cannabis dream, because I know you have some dream that you're thinking about.
I do. They might be on this someplace here, but I will say, after this conference, I walked in with a very set mission, because I myself was not just the founder and the CEO. I actually, as an attendee, I learned a lot. And I got a lot of insight. And there's some things that I had in the back of my brain that I was just kind of letting percolate. But now I'm able to wait a minute, I got the answers this week. I now know how to pursue some of those opportunities in a way that I didn't know before I started, which is what this conference was intended to be. The place that you come to enhance your vision and to execute. And so I am grateful for the vendors that participated. I'm very grateful for the sponsors that assisted us in making it happen. I think Governor Bryan and Tricoche, who is our Lieutenant Governor, Positive Nelson, they were instrumental in really fostering the legislation so that I can do this. And so we really do look forward to really taking it to the next level as the legislation has been finalized, ratified, and we're looking as a community in terms of what comes next, what we need to do next to start developing this industry.
Wonderful. Well, things are heating up, and it all starts with the stories that we have. So, thank you everybody for watching this interview. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you, Diamond.
Thank you, Jackson. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Five. All the way from